Welcome back, everybody, for the FIDE Online World Corporate Chess Championship. When all is said and done, there will only be one. I am joined by Anna Kremling. Anna, great to have you today. Are you excited for the finals?
I'm super excited for the finals. I mean, this seems to be the best day to join this commentary. So it's an honor once again to do commentary with you, Robert. It's been a while, but I always really enjoy doing it.
Same here, and it's going to be a fun event because there are only 8 teams remaining, and those 8 teams are vying for a world championship title. Let's remind everybody of the new format because we're out of the group stage. So we get here, there will only be one team winning this event. So for the pairing purposes, the teams were ranked 1 through 8 according to their average team rating. The quarter and semifinals will just have one match like we've seen before. The finals will be a dual match, 2 matches. You play your 4 games, you get a little rest, you go back for 4 more. And if there is a tie, the tie is broken with a blitz game, 3 minutes, 2 second increment. And if the blitz match is drawn, there will be an Armageddon game. So can you believe that? Not only is there a team competition, Anna, but there could also be blitz and Armageddon. What kind of pressure does that put them under?
Armageddon always puts a lot of pressure. It's really difficult to know if you would rather play white or black. That's sort of like a preference. But Armageddon basically means playing a game that's going to be full of pressure, and doing that in a team that just adds more pressure because all of a sudden your result doesn't just affect yourself, but it also affects the whole team. So that would definitely be something very exciting.
Absolutely. And let's tell everybody who these 8 teams are. We have the bracket. You can see their rankings by average team rating. They all won their groups. You see Spare in the top left taking on ERG, Sparebank Trade Union taking on Empty Solutions in the 4-5 matchup, Morgan Stanley Hungary taking on PT Pelabuhan Tanjuk Priok, and Granke Bank taking on Anahuac there in the bottom right. And as the games get underway, let's look at the matchups, just a broad overview here of the teams and their players. There are grandmasters, including Super GM Jan Napomischi up there for Spare. You have Georg Meyer for Granke Bank. But let's go to the games. Let's move on to the games there as they are beginning. So let's start with none other than Jan Napomischi. Anna has the black pieces against Anwar Ismagambetov, a grandmaster, playing G6 out of the Spanish. So what do you think about this? And is Jan just trying to get a kind of less familiar position? He's playing a strong opponent, but maybe he feels the pressure to win?
I think so. Especially with the white pieces, I think that he at least feels the pressure to draw. He's playing with the white pieces, Anwar. But once again, Nipo is a super strong player. I mean, he's one of the best players in the world. So it's gonna be really tough. It's really cool to see these very strong people playing in this tournament. Because every team can have one free agent. So it's really really exciting to see these super strong players playing here. And yeah, now he's going for c3, a6. Is this theory, Robert?
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, it's funny because playing like a sideline in a way, but theory within that sideline. And at the super grandmaster level, they kind of know not everything. They are not full of perfect information at all times, but they know most of these sidelines here. And look at this move, Bishop E2. You've given up a pawn in the center and then drop the bishop back. But the reason White is going for this is ideally you get to take back on d4 with your pawn and have a beautiful center. Or if you take on c3, knight takes c3, White has 3 minor pieces out compared to 1 for black. Maybe we'll see a bishop g5, a quick castle, and that's how black can get under attack.
Yeah, so typically when white goes for a gambit, that's sort of the idea that at least they want to get something for the pawn and attack and piece development. I guess it's what they're trying to go for in this position here. So it's quite common to be giving away sometimes this d4 pawn in different openings. And now we can see that black is going for d3. So black is giving back the pawn, but perhaps slowing a bit the development for white.
That's absolutely true. And this pawn on c3 blocks the knight's jump out. So that's why Jan gives the pawn back. Sometimes it's not worth stealing the material if it comes at such a cost of giving white that rapid development. So we'll keep an eye on this game. We'll go around to some others as well. I see that Anton Korbov is playing, a very strong grandmaster from Ukraine representing Sparebank Trade Union. And in this position, I caught my eye because there's a queen on h4, and I know we may be familiar with ideas like this, some of our viewers may not. It looks kind of scary for black, right, with that queen on the king side.
Definitely. I mean, every single time that there's a queen on the king side, you have to have a lookup for it. And just like you're saying, that h7 pawn could become a weak point. I don't know if at some point there could be any ideas of going knight g5 and trying to push for e5 somehow. That could definitely be that could definitely lead to some sort of an attack. But it seems like Varakomsky is going for an attack, and we'll have to see if Korbov can defend this.
And one of the ways to fend off an attack is by striking back toward the center. It seems counterintuitive, right? If I'm getting attacked on the king side, don't have to put all my pieces there. But if you can attack in the center, then white's pieces cannot just go free on the king side. They'll have to respond. So b6 played, that looks like a slow move with a queen on h4, but knight g5, for example, doesn't threaten the checkmate just yet. And maybe black has time to just play h6 anyway. And black is trying to play bishop to b7, maybe knight to c5. It's all about timing. You can't just make these moves without thinking, because white will try to push an e5 type of move at some point. But Korbov's so experienced, he understands that for now he's all right, and the evaluation bar says just as much.
Yeah, exactly. So he can't really go knight g5 yet, just like you said. There will have to be a sort of correct move order if there's going to be any attack here. But going bishop b7, I think that's a great move, placing the bishop on b7, just to have this full diagonal. And like you said, try to take a bit control of the center, counter attacking in the center. That's what you want to do if white is attacking on the king side. So I think that this definitely no direct attack yet, but I think it could lead to some really interesting positions this game.
That's right. And I'm going to go to one of the games in the match of, we have PT playing against Morgan Stanley Hungary. And so we're going to switch matches here to show this game on board 4. Chelsea Monica, who streams, who is 2250, playing against international master Ryosuke Nanjo, Japanese international master. Very strong matchup here. And the last one played was b4. So this position out of Sicilian, white has thrust the g pawn up the board. Black has put his b pawn. So Anna, you look at this position, right? Black's king's in the center, white king the same. What to make of it?
I think it looks like a pretty crazy position. It's like the type of position where, you know, any player could sort of, if they play a little inaccuracy, that could really change the whole game. But I don't know if they have prepared this. I can see that Chelsea, that Monica, she's been thinking for a little bit. So I don't really know if she had prepared for a position like this. But I'm really happy to see her playing in this tournament. Just like you mentioned, she's a fellow streamer on Twitch. And you know, she's a great streamer, and she's also a very strong chess player. So it's really fun to see her playing in this tournament and playing in this match.
Definitely. And knight d1, while she's of course experienced and she may be familiar with some of the ideas based on clock management thus far, it feels like black sort of has the upper hand. And what worries me is white has nowhere to castle, because you put a pawn on g5. On the other side of the board, you put your pawn on a4. So your king could get caught in the center, whereas black could play bishop e7 and castle into an impending attack. But at least your king, if it needs to, can get out of the center. So that concerns me. Typical ideas like d5 at some point for black, maybe right now, look pretty decent for Ryosuke Nanjo. And I don't know, this is starting to look pretty good for Morgan Stanley Hungary on board 4.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that point is a very good point that you're making, that white is going to have a very difficult time castling. White will probably not be able to castle a king side, and castling queen side also seems very dangerous, whereas black just has the simple idea of going bishop e7, castling, and then perhaps attacking the king. And d5 is a great move as it opens up the center, which is something that you would want to do when the king is still in the center and can't castle yet.
That's how this game could go. It's like d5, bishop b7, everything breaking open. And oftentimes with a king in the center, that move was not engine approved, but the engine isn't exactly on the highest depth. So sometimes it takes a while to register. But d5, I think, was the thematic move. It would have protected this pawn on b4 as well. Not that you mind that pawn being captured, because if the queen takes it, then a move like d5 will hit the queen and open the center. So this is actually going to be a very tense battle. I think it's going to come down to white's king safety. But if she could stabilize, she will have the advantage. And whoa, that move not appreciated by the engine at all, going up to plus 2 point something. So there must be some tactic. And I think it starts with f4, kicking the knight. And you can even think about f5 or even e5 to close down the center and then play for an attack from there.
There being many tempos won by white now after the knight went to e5. If the black knight wouldn't have gone to e5, then moves like f4 would not have been possible. But she's going for a5 instead here.
Makes sense, right? Hitting the knight on b6. I think one of the things that can be difficult is like move order and figuring out, wait, do I attack that knight? Do I attack the knight in the center? Do I attack both? And you can mix up ideas, not because these are very strong chess players. They're titled chess players. But the problem becomes when there are too many attractive options in a position, we sometimes go for both and maybe only one works at a time.
Yeah. You know, have you heard about all of these stories of some super GMs not knowing which rook to take and thinking for super long about, if they should take rook h d1 or go rook a d1 in some positions? There's this story with Ulf Anderson that he played correspondence chess. And, it took him 1 week to decide which rook he was going to bring to d1 because there were so many different opportunities. So it can be tough to know what move order to choose.
That's an amazing story. And Ulf Anderson, of course, a legend of chess and one of the best players in his generation. So if he took a week to decide, maybe that would mean a month for all of us. And well, there was a capture on d5, recapture, but I was talking about white's king being unsafe. Now it's looking like black's king because f4 is coming. The d5 pawn's under attack. Even if the king does get castled to g8, still doesn't feel that safe. So I think we should leave the players to figure it out on this board. We'll go within this match. I see that Mohammed Lutfi Ali, the international master, on board one with a black piece against international master Levan Bergadzi. That's the cool thing about this tournament. All these teams are very strong. The average team rating for each team in the playoffs is at least 2270. I think it goes from 2270 to like 24 something. And remember, 3 of the 4 players are members of that company, are work employees there rather. So their employees are very talented chess players. And Anna, in this position, we see the 2 bishops for white, but white is down a pawn and the engine says 0. So of course that means a dead draw, right?
Well, more than a dead draw, I would say that it means that there is enough compensation for white. So if white is a pawn down, but the engine says that it's equal, it typically means that the activity that white has equals 1 pawn. So that means that white has a lot more activity and has compensation for that pawn basically. So I definitely don't think that this is gonna end up in a draw just because of that.
Just one of my quick comments about how the engine can mislead us into thinking 0. The players are not thinking in this way. They look at this position, and if you're international master Ali here, you're saying, well, I have an extra pawn, so maybe I can figure out how to free my pieces up and use my material advantage. And international master Bergadzi saying, well, your pieces can't move. My rook's coming to d7. My bishop on e4 is fantastic, attacking the knight on c6 and that pawn on b7 behind it while protecting c2. And this bishop on b6, taking away d8, no rook trades for you, protecting f2 if that were ever to be in trouble. I think it's easier to play this position from the white side, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this sort of comes to what type of player you are. Some people like to be a pawn down, have a little, or be a pawn up, have a little extra material, and just try to defend the whole position. And, just basically say, you are not going to be able to win from this position. I'm going to defend until we get into an endgame where I'm a pawn up. Whereas other people really like playing a pawn down, but having a lot of activity because then their pieces are a lot more active. They can sort of pressure their opponent down, and I think it's more a matter of preference what you prefer.
Well, I prefer being up over 2 minutes on the clock, so I do like white's position even without the clock situation, but especially taking that into account, it looks dangerous. We do have results, so I'm going to go over to that match in spare because Jan Napomischi has been held to a draw, or you could say held his opponent to a draw, but I'm a little confused because this position looks anything but drawish. This is a wild position. So just getting word to see who offered this draw. It looks like black made the final move, but why is this a draw? This king is in the open. White has 1 fewer rook, but also 1 extra minor piece, and this attack, right? Move like knight to e4 can start. So a bit surprised that a draw offer would be accepted at this point.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised too. I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that, well, white is a bit better because of the whole attack and all the pieces and everything. So I don't know if white was just content with making a draw because they were playing against Nippo, Sometimes that's sort of the case. They're playing against a super strong player, but I definitely think that if White had the opportunity, that they should have kept on going here.
That's a grandmaster of the white piece. In a single game, of course, Anwar can beat Jan Napomischi. So
Yeah.
surprising to us, but let's keep going within this match. We have board two is Alexander Kadetsky taking on Yuri Mazi Mazinin. No, I think I got that right. Mazunin. Oof, I'm trying. I'm
You're
reading the
doing great,
Cyrillic
Robert.
here. I'm trying my best. I haven't studied my Russian in a long time. So anyway, in this position, you see that even by material, all four minor pieces on the board. But look at this, jumping into this f5 square because the queen protects the knight. That could be a problem for black, trying to figure out which bishop do I give up. Do I take on f5, giving up the light square bishop? Do I allow white to take on g7, giving the dark square bishop? Or maybe I should just retreat my bishop to f8, which is played, but then the e5 pawn, that feels like more of a target.
That is definitely going to be a target, and I don't even know if you could perhaps take advantage of the fact that the bishop is on g3 and it's pinning this pawn on e5 and go something like knight d4 to really exchange black's pair of bishops.
Oh, actually, knight d4 looks like an excellent move. Good call. The pawn is not just under attack, but it's pinned. So knight f5 did it. And there it is. Good call. And a knight f5 to d4, trying to get this bishop, and it can't move. So black's king is the worst of the two. There's more space that's available for white's pieces in front of it. If you say take on d4, knight takes d4, then I'll take your bishop, play bishop g4, come after you on the diagonal. This looks very scary.
Yeah, I definitely really like this for white. So we can see, how annoying a pin can be. That pawn on e5 would have stopped the knights from ever going to d4, but because the pawn is pinned and the queen is on c7, white is allowed to play this.
And this looks great. And that's great for spare because Jan Nepomniachtchi held that draw in a tough position. And now they're board two with the white pieces in great shape. So that could be a lead for spare. But let's see what's happening on board three because Maxim Lavrov with the black pieces. Well, he's up how many pawns? It's only one pawn. It looks like more. But this should be a winning position for black. Sometimes one pawn is not enough. But Anna, here it looks like the pawn structure is better for black. You have more material. So it shouldn't be too difficult.
Yeah, especially they have also the same color bishop.
Mm-hmm.
If there would have been different color bishops, perhaps white could have tried to exchange queen somehow and then go for that endgame, which is a bit more difficult to win with different color bishops. But because they have the same color bishops as well, it's probably going to be quite easy for black to win this.
And one of the ideas is, okay, white can go and try to take these queenside pawns, and then black will play h4, h3, and actually try to checkmate the white king. And this bishop on f1 is bad. Another idea is queen e3 check, queen f2, and you actually might trap this bishop, weirdly enough. It just doesn't have much space. So the bishop on e6 is excellent. The bishop on f1 is actually quite bad. Very few squares to work with. So I think this is going to be a win for spare. And if they win this game and Kadetsky get a great position, they will take the match. So we'll keep our eyes out, just be on the lookout. But let's go on to other games where we haven't checked in on. This game between Fyodor Mishakov and Wojciech Reza. What's happening? This king is castled on c8, and a queen trade is being offered, and white's turn. So, and do you think you should keep the queens on the board? Your king in the center for white, or should you just trade them and have the two bishops in an endgame?
Well, I think that in this exact position, the queen doesn't really have a lot of squares to go to where it wouldn't be traded. So the only place I can see where the queens would not be traded would be to go queen g3. But because the king is in the center and, the bishop would be pinned on e2, I think that it makes more sense to at least offer a queen trade again. So you can see bishop f3. Now white is offering a queen trade again, and they're trading queens here.
That's right. And this is board three matchup between Emphy Solutions and Sparebank Trade Union. And the queens have been traded. The pawn has gone to e3 for white. Look at this pawns in the center here. They're in red because that's how black is seeing them. Like, oh, I don't like that. That's painful. But f5, what a way to strike. Because if e5, look at this bishop on d2. The dark squares are clogged by white's pawns. And that's why white takes an f5 to keep the bishops open. But now the e file is open. Maybe black has some counterplay. Or Anna, do you think that white should just be able to increase the pressure?
I think that bishop pair is going to be very strong for white. Now the bishop is pinning the knight on d6, and it feels like black is a bit restricted with their movement. This bishop is going to e7, And perhaps black will have some ideas of going g5, but then that will give the e5 square for the bishop. So I feel like white's bishops are really, really strong. And the king, well, the king is now castling, so the king is going to be safe. White is also going to be able to take advantage of the e-file being open. And I really prefer white here.
I agree. And one thing that was almost there for black was bishop h4, rook h4, g5. The problem is it's not a fork because white can get away with bishop takes d6 with check and end up a piece up. Otherwise, this would be a great decision for black. Did not work out because of the check. And so g5 was played. And oh gosh, now rook's on the 7th rank. You have the bishop pair. I think a material is about to fall. That's what it looks like. You can just slide your other rook to e1. Oh, didn't like that move because g4.
Ooh.
g4 and bishop g5 check, and the rook on h7 is not defended.
Wow.
Oh no. That's how
Everything
these games turn
is
around.
taking a turn here.
And that's a big problem because after g4 and it's played, that's a big turnaround. And it was looking so nice. The rook should have went to h1 to reinforce the other rook. And now after g4, that rook is not protected, and bishop g5 is a. I mean, how does it? Can you stop it? I don't see any way.
I guess you have to take on d6.
Okay, so you don't lose material because bishop d6, bishop d6, we trade rooks. And then I guess black is slightly better because of the advanced pawns, but it is opposite color.
Oh, but it's not going.
Just this. Wait, that's a piece.
That's a piece. That's just a piece.
Wait, but there's what? Okay, didn't take it because I guess this ensuing endgame, it was the bishop pair that looked nice. Now there's g. Okay, but g takes f3, rook e7 check, king c8. This pawn's under attack. Neither side feeling that comfortable in this tactical situation, but black had that. It had just taken on f3. Instead, we have a slightly better position for black because the knight can go from color complex to color complex. The pawn a6 could become a target in the near future. But Anna, that was a pretty wild tactical sequence, and it felt like the players were not ready for it.
Definitely, I totally agree. This was definitely a very exciting tactical sequence, and I think that neither of us saw that coming, which probably Reza didn't really see either when he played rook e1. So yeah, it was really important to go rook h1 and reinforce the other rook there on h7. He seemed to have a great position before, but now it has turned around, and Mishakov is going to be the one that's going to try to go for the win here.
For sure, that a6 pawn is weak. I have to go to this game because I see 2 seconds left on International Master Ali's clock, and now down in exchange. So it looks like Morgan Stanley Hungary is going to take this all IM matchup on board 1. That a pawn is running very easy to keep pushing it. a6, rook b7, a7. You're going to win this bishop. So I just saw a couple seconds remaining, and as we tuned in, it looks like white was winning material and thus taking this game. So that's a big win for Morgan Stanley. They'll be thrilled. They've been playing really well throughout the group stage. And, well, that's just easy at this point. So we'll get out of this one. Morgan Stanley taking it. Let's go to another matchup within this one here. Chelsea-Monaco. This game still very sharp, despite the queens being off. And now we have opposite colored bishops with d4. Anybody? Uh-oh. There it is.
There it is. That's another tactical moment. Wow. I mean, Robert, you're just finding the games at their prime.
I'm just, I see it. We have to move on. I just pick a game, and it turns out that there was a tactical moment there. The rook on h1 was under attack. d4 opened that bishop up. And it's still not easy to win this. Actually, I could see white winning this game. If you get your pawn to d4 and play pawn to b5, you get a breakthrough on the queen side. And a rook for the bishop dynamic, that doesn't mean as much if there's a passed pawn heading your way. And this king is coming up to c4. And I actually think I prefer white's chances at this point.
I think that, just like you're saying, white has a lot of practical chances, and especially with 1 minute versus 20 seconds, I think that black could feel very pressured. I know that a lot of times when I play and, I am an exchange up with 2 rooks and my opponent has a bishop, I mean, the bishop can become so strong, it can sometimes become better than a rook. And I think that we might be seeing that in this game, perhaps.
And the nerves, and look at Chelsea-Monaco at over a minute to 20 seconds for black. And that's what happens when you play a lot of blitz, especially online. You are accustomed to situations like this where you don't know who's better. You're trying to assess on the fly, and both of you are getting in time trouble. The pawn's on d6. This pawn can go to a7, and that bishop protects a7 and stops the pawn from getting to f2, while protecting d6 is doing it all. And rook f7 behind the passed pawn. This king can come into c6. White has 2 passed pawns, black has 1, and yet the eval bar says completely even. I mean, that's not what the players are thinking.
That's not how the players feel like feel right now. But bishop h2 is a very nice move to just stop the f-pawn from pushing. Now we can see that black is trying to go for these checks. Perhaps, I don't know if they want to try to get a repetition, but no.
What a brave move, by the way, king to e5. Like, just moving the king, allowing the passed pawn to go. And it still says even. Somehow they're playing accurate moves here, completely even position. It looks to me like white should be punching the pawns through first, but of course d7 drops the rook on d3, and now it likes black because the a7 pawn. Who's taking the pawn? The pawn was hanging. And now king b7, there's rook to f8. So what is happening here?
What is happening? This looks absolutely insane. White is a full rook down, but has these two extremely strong passed pawns. I think that this could sort of go anyway.
I guess there's a8 at some point, but okay, it's rook b1. Watch out for rook b8, so we have to play rook a8, so you can take this pawn.
Yeah.
Oh
White has to be very careful to not drop any pawn, because that would change the whole dynamic of the position.
That's right. That would actually probably end in a loss. Rook takes d7, I think, is the only save. Rook f7 check. Well, that was actually pretty clever by black to allow the rook to b8, take on d7. You're going to win the a7 pawn, and rook and h pawns almost never winning. Oh, don't take. Checkmate! Checkmate! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! What a trick by Ryosuke Nanjo, setting up the mating net. Oh my gosh, that was so tricky, and that's what he was setting up, a trap by bringing the king to d5, because he saw that she can go rook b8. He saw that he can sack the rook, and that the king went to e8, rook a7, rook b5 check is a good move, but after king e6, you need to move your king out of the opposition. Black's king takes away the squares, rook takes h5, a fatal error. That is checkmate with a lone rook and king.
That was, I mean, this just shows how quickly a game can turn around. They played so well in the time pressure with, you know, a very difficult position to play with because of all the material imbalances. But we can see that the game can completely turn around in one move just like this.
And look at the score. It's 2-2. That tied the match. Yep, that was a critical victory. Wow. We're going to go to the other games still going on here because we see that Elena Kashlinskaya with the white pieces, she's winning this game against Marlena Chlost. So it looks like the pawns are just pushing. G6, G7, bishop C4 should do the trick. King on G6, that's not going to help your cause. You need to push the G pawn through. So I think she should figure this out. The second time around, there it goes. G7, bishop C4, or G7 actually is mate. G7, H7 at that point. But okay, this is easily winning. So King F7 getting queen. So let's go to the other game remaining here. This is board 4. And let's go to the other game here. Oh, this is winning. We have a Rook End Game. The king gets out. If a king comes closer, you throw in the check, and then you get your queen.
So, famous Rook End Game.
Igor Yanich for Emphy Solutions takes that game over Evgeny Kretov. And wow, so this match is, that's for Sberbank Trade Union took the 2.5 lead. And so even though Yanich wins the game, it's not enough. So 2.5, 1.5 victory for Sberbank Trade Union. Oh my gosh. And I still can't get over that checkmate that we just saw with the rook on the A8 final move.
I cannot get over that one either. And I think that probably hurt a lot to lose in that way. That's one of the ways that hurts most to lose, by just losing, you know, in one move with a trick like that. But it was very clever. It was very clever to set up this type of trick because, you know, practically with this little time, it was very easy for that to happen. Obviously, you just want to get the pawn out of there and just, you know, say, all right, you're going to have to fight for a draw, but this is just a draw. But no, there was just a checkmate in one move there. So,
wow.
Incredible game.
So much pressure, right, on the clock. We were just talking about Chelsea Monica. She streams, she has a lot of blitz. So I thought she would be the one who was more accustomed to that situation. Maybe she is, but these things happen. As we know, we play a ton of blitz. You have a good game, things are going your way, and then suddenly you miss checkmate in one because it came out of nowhere. So we do have all matches done. We couldn't get every single game under our attention, unfortunately, but we know that the results as such, Spare takes down ERG. That's good for Jan Napomischi, and he made that draw in a tough position. That was kind of a fortunate escape for him. And Sberbank Trade Union beats Emphy Solutions 2.5, 1.5. We had a tie 2-2 between Morgan Stanley Hungary and PT. And we, in our final match of the round here, we had Gronke Bank beating Anuak 2.5, 1.5, led by Georg Meyer on board 1. He scores the victory for Gronke, as did Elena Kashlinskaya, the free agent on board 2. She helps that team out. So Gronke moves on. We will have a blitz match, I guess, because of the tiebreaks. Let me just confirm with the team what's going on.
Yep. Let's see if we get a blitz match there between Morgan Stanley and Palawan. That would be very, very exciting to get a blitz match. I think it's always more exciting with the lower time control, and these games have already been extremely exciting. So I would really look forward to getting a blitz match there. So we're gonna see if we are going to be getting that. But I have to say that even though we were not able to watch every single game here, I do think that we found some really nice moments, and I'm happy that we were able to follow these very exciting moments live, like for instance the Rook checkmate or all of the other tactical moments where we joined in. So very exciting games.
I agree, and I still can't believe that Anwar accepted that draw against Jan Napomischi, because it's clear that the team from Spare is super strong. They were the #1 overall rated team on average, and I know it's Jan Napomischi, but Anwar's a grandmaster, very strong player in his own right, and accepting a draw in that position, it felt like it was letting Jan off the hook.
Absolutely, especially when he had such a great position. So, yeah, perhaps should have continued the game, but I'm sure he had his reasons. But yeah, it seemed to be a very good opportunity for them and for that team, especially when you're playing in a team, right? Because every result can really make a big change for everybody.
Yeah, it's certainly the case. And we're getting word that there is going to be 10 minutes before the next round. The players are going to get settled. There is going to be the whole team playing 3-minute plus 2-second increment blitz. So if you are here just to play some rapid chess, think again. The players are going to have to test their mettle in blitz games against the other team. And we just remind everybody that while we're having great chess, we're having a good time, there also is money being raised for various initiatives. FIDE doing a great job raising funds for players with disabilities, for veterans who have played chess throughout their careers and need some support, and chess and education. So if you're able to, click on the button on the Twitch channel. Please use the command for Corp Donate, and any generosity is extremely appreciated if you can. So we are going to go on a brief break. When we return in a couple minutes, we'll get set for the blitz tiebreak. 4 games going on at once. We'll need to catch our breath. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back. And we return in the playoff stage of the FIDE Online World Corporate Chess Championship. Anna, this was an exciting round. 4 matchups, 3 have been decided, and we're about to have blitz tiebreaks.
The best type of tie breaks. It's gonna be super exciting. I'm really looking forward to this. And yeah, here we can see the format. So we can see at the top team. Well, we can see yeah, we're already in the playoff.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I was gonna say, Anna,
yeah.
are your vocal cords right? You said you're excited, but are your vocal cords excited for the fast-paced blitz that we're about to see with 3 minutes and 2-second increment?
My vocal cords are super excited. I know that yours are amazing for this, Robert, and mine are gonna match this. I'm ready for it.
I believe that every step of the way. And if the blitz match is tied 2-2, just like the rapid match was, then we will be sent to Armageddon. And Armageddon is something in chess where one player, the player of the white pieces, gets 5 minutes, black gets 4 minutes, no increment. White will need to win that game. Black can draw the game, and that would count as a win for the player with the black piece. So draw odds to black, time odds to white. It's always exciting to see Armageddon. And the teams actually nominate a player. It's very likely that they'll nominate their top board, but it's also possible that maybe one of the other boards is a blitz specialist, a speed demon, and so you choose that player. But that's only in the event that we have a tie. We see the Morgan Stanley team. We have them behind the scenes here. You can see them now. They're getting ready. Some of them were stretching. I'm sure there are nerves. I'm sure there's, they're very proud of each other just to be in this playoff and then to tie 2-2. But they'll have to get their mouse ready, each player, because sometimes there's no thinking in blitz chess. You just got to move.
You just gotta move. I was gonna ask Robert, what do you prefer in an Armageddon? Do you prefer playing with the white pieces or with the black pieces?
Oh gosh, I would say it's kind of 50-50 in many regards. I would prefer to have the black pieces, but it also depends on like what happened before that. If let's say you're playing a classical tournament and the end is some kind of tiebreaker, but if you won a bunch of games, I want the white pieces, I'm going to go for that win. Or say, I drew the last couple of games just down the stretch. Let's just hold and make the draw. And if I'm playing someone higher rated, I also would probably want the black pieces because beating them is very difficult. So trying to make that draw, it's a hard choice to make. What would you choose?
A part of me agrees, but then there's another part of me that just always likes to go for the win. And, I really like playing with the white pieces. I feel like my openings are a lot better with the white pieces. So at the same time, I don't know. I think I would prefer to play with the white pieces and try to go for a win, but it really depends on the opponent, just like you said.
And well, we do have liftoff. Not quite an Armageddon yet, starting with the 3 minute plus 2-second increment blitz. C3 played by International Master Ali, trying to get D4 in, and that's why Bishop G4 is often played. Let me take your knight at some point and soften the D4 square, but I think White can just push this pawn. That doesn't stop it, and H3 played first, offering the exchange. So, and a quieter opening to start with in this game, but I like White's position.
Yeah, I play stuff that is similar to this with black. So I kind of like the ideas for black as well, but this is white. White does have quite an active position, and just like you said, the idea is for white at some point to try to take as much center as possible by going d4, which is why black wanted to go bishop g4 to stop d4 immediately. And now that's why also they're going bishop h5 instead of trading, because they want to keep that pin there to avoid d4 being played.
And I like that White has not played d4 yet, instead castling. If you play d4, there could be a quick strike for black in the center thanks to this pin, so I'm agreeing with you here. a6 played. You can take that knight, double the pawns, and that was played. And at some point, you can go queen a4. This is a known idea to break the pin by getting aggressive. And I think queen a4 could be a very useful move. Of course, you can just develop your pieces, and White has a lead in development. But if black gets out, the bishop pair should be good. Let's move on to another game because I just see at the corner of my eye this one. Pawns are storming. That was more of a positional battle to start with. This says positional chess. Come on, this is blitz chess. Trying to get g6, trying to get h6. But black hasn't castled. So it's possible that Farid Firmansyah says, okay, you're trying to attack me there. My king's running in the other direction.
That's the thing. When white goes for an attack this early, when black hasn't decided where to castle, okay, now black actually made a choice by going rook c8, because now they've decided they're not going to castle queenside, which is what would lead to perhaps a more positional position because it wouldn't be this race of of black, which is which is what we're perhaps going to be seeing now. But king b1 was played, and I don't know if the king is going to stay in the center on e8 or if they're going to go ahead and castle. I think they have to castle at some point, but then these pawns are going to become very strong on g5 and h5.
Yeah, super scary to castle, but if you do castle and g6 is played, black can shut it down with h6. So whichever pawn pushes for white, if you play h6, black will play g6. If you play g6, black will play h6, kind of deal. So that allows black to castle, but it won't feel truly safe until you trade the queens off the board, for example, because that king with those pawns storming could be dangerous.
Exactly. And black's pawns can't really push yet because they sort of need to see what white does with their pawns. So they're going to have to stay in this initial position. And okay, now they're deciding to castle.
Okay, castle, well, it happened. So, I mean, taking on f5 makes sense. And maybe some kind of knight f4, knight g3 first. So taking the pawn. Oh, h6 is coming. Okay, wow, what a decision to play f6, because just a move ago, if you played like b6, random move, h6, you can no longer play g6 and shut it down because there would be a checkmate. So that's why black played f6 himself, saying you're not getting in with your queen.
And now after g6 and h6, we can see that there's been a sort of lock on the king side attack there. So rook e1 was played to put some pressure on e6, and now rook c6 also to help out on defending e6. So it feels like there's not going to be as much attack on the black king anymore. And now they're trying to double up rooks on the e-file.
Yeah, it's all about this pawn now, because black has to sit and defend this pawn. White's rooks are active, and the rook on e2, just like the rook on c6, defends and attacks. There could be some kind of g4, g5. If black isn't careful, you give up a pawn to break open the position, because in the event of the pawn going to g5, which is not happening, but if the pawn went to g5 and black took the h pawn, you can play h6 to break open the king side. But I like this move, queen g4. You're just forcing black, in a sense, to play a move like rook e8 and sit defending while white's pieces are perfectly placed attacking. So I like the position for Peter Lizak. Let's go to another game to see what's happening. Wow, okay, this position, I see a knight on g5, a rook on g1. Ryosuke Nanjo, the hero, the Japanese international master, saved the day for Morgan Stanley. And then, wait, there's an attack on the queen side for black, a potential attack in the center for white. There's a king here. Whose attack's coming first, Anna?
That's a great question. I kind of feel like black's attack is going to be a little bit faster because that a4 pawn is hanging now. So it feels like black's pieces are really going to be getting into attack. For instance, if rook takes a4, now there's going to be some rook a1 threats immediately. So I feel like black is a little bit faster, but now the e-file is getting open and white has a great rook on e1. So it feels like now white is sort of solidifying their whole position.
Yeah, with this b3 move, that's a pawn chain. Now going after the d5. Actually, this has been very good play from both sides. Maybe some of the moves catching us off guard, but I think high quality. And bishop d2, what a move just to go after the b4 pawn. And the queen can also slide up to f4 or somewhere else to the f7 pawn was under attack. So bishop d5 attacks, it defends. It's a great bishop. I think I like white's chances because this king is on d8. That doesn't look very safe. White's king actually looks quite safe for the time being.
Yeah, for now, definitely. The only thing that could perhaps be problematic are those dark squares in front of the white king, but I think that white would probably be able to defend that. And there's not really any clear way for black to take advantage of that yet.
I'm looking at rook takes a4 at some point, because then the queen gets in here. They're checkmating ideas down on the a2 and a1 squares, but this king is in the center. And if your attack doesn't work out, you're just lost, right? You're sacrificing a rook for a couple pawns. So rook a6 played. I think there might be a knight c5, queen b8 check. That actually wins a pawn. Ooh. That wins a pawn. Oh, did not see that, but that's maybe not the easiest thing to spot right there, but this doesn't work the second time. But knight takes c5 was available. I'll show that very quickly. The point, everyone, is after takes queen b8, the queen has to block. You trade queens. At the end of the line, the rook takes the bishop. You net a pawn, and black's king is still in trouble. So that was missed. Hard to see with no time on the clock. Let's just check the other game that we haven't looked at. It's a little bit more locked up. And we see that white infiltrating with the queen on d6, just like that other game, the e6 pawn. Petropap in trouble here. She's to go to a passive defense with knight to g7. White's position looks amazing.
I definitely agree. This is sort of the dream position you want to have when you're playing against an isolated pawn, an isolated backwards pawn that we can as the one on e6. And now, they're even bringing this knight to f4 probably to add some extra pressure on the e6 pawn. So every single piece of white is going to be attacking that e6 pawn. That's just the dream. But we can see now that black played queen f6 to put some pressure on this d4 pawn, so the knight cannot move yet. So we can see that black is trying to get some play there as well.
That's right, g5 trying to open things up. The knight can get to f4, g3 is under attack. The rook's hanging. Don't bond the rook. Where that move was not approved of. So mate is an e5 and d4 kind of. There it is, step one, but didn't like that move. So I was looking at the same thing. So I can't blame Petropat, but this is eval bar. This is blitz for you. You don't have enough time to calculate everything. Things are happening before you. Wait, f4.
And now we go again. Oh wow.
Oh, that was a fork, and now white wins material. Another queen.
And the queen.
Oh gosh, that's a free queen, and
that's a free queen.
And we saw her; she couldn't believe it, and she's distraught. Okay, let's go back to the games here. She is pretty unhappy. That was a big. Wait, the queen wasn't taken, but she's down 2 rooks for knight. So let's go on to a new game. Let's go to this one here between Levan Bergadze and Mohamed Lutfi Ali. Excuse me. This is an end game where it's anyone's position because that pawn d3 looks really strong. You need your rook to attack the king, and then this a pawn could start rolling if you're not careful. So, wow, who's better? Even material, but it feels like at first glance black should be better.
Yeah,
that pawn on d3 is real advanced.
Yeah, the pawn on d3 is super advanced, so it feels like black should be better. But I mean, the pawn on d3 could also become a target if black is not really careful.
That's true. And if the bishop moves, watch out for a4, a5, a6. I mean, that pawn can run.
Yep, that pawn can run definitely. And that e6 pawn is also quite weak. So I think that as long as that d3 pawn doesn't get to promote, basically, this is totally fine for white. And I think that they should be able to defend that. But rook takes f3 now. There's a pawn hanging there as well.
It's true, but that pawn can run a5. It's 1-1. By the way, we saw the match even up. We have another game going. It is a Rook End Game, and king c6 can win this pawn. But even if you win that pawn, you should not win this game with the black pieces because these are double pawns. To win end games, you need passed pawns. Double pawns do not help you create passed pawns, but you have to be careful not to allow this black king in because, that king could come to e3 if you're not careful. King e3.
And that could be some checkmate.
You have to go king c1. You have to go king c1. You just checkmated in this manner. The king can hide on b2. Well, what if you take? King takes. Take on b4. You have rook c4 check. So you do survive, barely surviving. Oh, don't allow king c3. That's you cannot allow. This should be a draw with proper play, but not easy in the end game. We're going to go quickly back to the other game. We got to go back and forth. Oh, wait,
go back and forth.
White took a pawn, and that pawn's going to a7. This is anyone's match. It looks like here for PT, they have the advantage now, but at any moment, rook b2 check could happen, d2 could happen, and then it could be black winning this game. So, oh my gosh.
Anything could happen here. It's...
oh, not a queen! Oh, no! Oh my gosh, stepped in line! No, that's
what we're saying. Anything can happen.
And that's going to be a win for PT with the white pieces up a queen and checkmate on the board with the bishop. And let's go to the other game because now PT has a 2-1 lead and they need a win. Does Morgan Stanley Hungary? This pawn is on b7. That gives them a fighting chance. Ryosuke Nanja was the player who won that game 1 with rook against rook, essentially. And unfortunately, rook b2 happens. I don't know if Chelsea Monica has seen the results of her teammates. You're in the middle of your own bullet time scramble, but she's doing the trick here. King here. Just go rook. I would go rook c8 check. Please take the pawn. But look at this.
Yeah, she has to try it. Well, now
she makes the draw. She makes the draw. And Morgan Stanley Hungary is eliminated. They clawed their way back just to get to the blitz tiebreak. And unfortunately, we'll go back to that position really. Oh, no, we won't. Yes, we will. Sorry to my producer for making his life as difficult as possible. We have to go back to this moment here because black steals a pawn in the center. And that's like, well, you're doing great. Like you up a pawn now, your pawn's on d3. But somehow this pawn went from a3 to a7 before you know it. And the bishop is covering the a8 square. And just a move king d5 that looks so natural. You only have one other king move, and you tend to want to avoid the color that your opponent's bishop is on. right? When we're facing opposite color bishops, we want to stay on our own bishop's color. Unfortunately, in this case, that allowed the pawn to promote because that bishop needed the full line of sight to the A8 square. Anna, we've all lost blitz games like this. I mean, what can you say for Morgan Stanley Hungary to go down in this way when you were just on the cusp of going to an Armageddon, keeping this match tied?
Yeah, it really does hurt. And we've seen in this whole match, we've seen a lot of these type of little tactics that have won the game. Like, for instance, here, King D5, A8, that's the queen. Or in the other match where there was this checkmate with the rook. So they're having a lot of one move tricks in this match, but that's just part of chess. And especially in faster time controls such as rapid, and even more so in blitz, this is basically what happens. And it hurts to lose in this way, but I think that they've been playing great. So we have seen really amazing matches. I think they should be happy with their matches, and yeah,
It just at some points, being happy is not enough because this is a competition. You want to win.
that's the problem. Yeah,
It's unfortunate. But what a fight. What a fight. So
yeah.
let's look at the updated brackets because we now know our final four. We have Spare. That's the Jan Napomischi led team on the top left of the bracket, taking on Sparebank Trade Union led by Anton Korbov. So we're about to have a super grandmaster battle on board one between those teams. And Gronke Bank taking on PT. I think that Gronke Bank is the big favorite, in my opinion, led by Georg Meyer on board one, the extremely strong, super solid grandmaster who also is an amazing blitz player. So if that match is tied 2-2 and they get to blitz, I think Georg can help spearhead that lineup. And I really believe that with a balanced lineup the rest of the way, I think it's even matchups on boards 2 through 4. Actually, maybe Gronke even has a rating advantage on board 2. I think that advantage, the GM-IM matchup on 1, leads Gronke to have the edge over PT, but anything can happen. And Anna, we just saw PT win this blitz tiebreak, so maybe they're feeling more motivated than ever.
Yep, that's what happens if you win a game of chess, or if you win a match. You're gonna feel more motivated, you're gonna have more confidence, and that is typically going to be shown in your chess games. A lot of times we can see that those type of players are a little bit more aggressive or play a little bit faster, and that can really help out practically in the game. So they could have an edge because of the fact that they won this match, definitely.
That's right. And Gronke is one of the biggest supporters in the chess world. They have the Gronke Classic and the Gronke Open. They have the Baden-Baden Chess Club and the Bundesliga. And the chess world will be a lot worse without the support from Gronke. And for those of you who are here, who have been a part of this, if you can, please do donate to the initiatives that FIDE has put forth. It's for players with disabilities, for veterans, and also for chess and education. So do get involved. Please hit the panel and the Twitch stream, use the command Corp donate. If you're able to, it would be greatly appreciated. But for now, Ann and I, we need to take a break because that was exciting. I feel wiped just seeing the finish there. We'll be back. The rounds will begin at about approximately half past the hour. So we'll take a brief break, and when we return, we'll get ourselves ready for the semifinals. Welcome back, everybody, to the FIDE World Corporate Championship Finals. Grandmaster Robert Hess alongside me, Anna Kramling. Anna, we needed that break because we saw a blitz tiebreak between Morgan Stanley Hungary and PT. How are you feeling? You recovered?
I have recovered. It took a while because it was a pretty crazy tiebreak, but I'm recovered now and I'm ready for the semifinals.
We will have the semifinals ahead. We have a couple minutes until then. We just wanted to go over one moment from a game that happened in the Blitz match, and it was between Peter Lizak, representing Morgan Stanley Hungary, and Farid Firmanzia from PT. So the player with the black pieces moves on with the team, but in this position, it looks pretty difficult for black because white is having all the fun here. There's rook staring down at the e6 pawn. The g6 pawn keeps that king on the back rank. But Anna, we see the engines say 0. So from experience, what can you say in positions like this where the engine tells you just shuffle your pieces around? How difficult is that to do?
I think it's very difficult to do. I think that as a chess player, you don't just want to make random moves. You want to have a plan behind every move. So to just be shuffling your pieces around, it's something that's not very intuitively. You want to come up with plans and you want to do stuff. So it's very difficult.
That's right. And I look at the engines as zeros. I look at the positions like, what do you mean zeros? This looks like a fun game to play, especially in Blitz. And let's see how this went, because at this moment, black went a5. You see the evaluation start to creep up in white's favor. And there, as he gets more depth, it sees white's advantage growing a bit. And the reason why a5 is played is to go b4 and for an attack. The reason why that could backfire is now the b5 pawn needs to have an eye kept on it. White went queen b3. Black went rook c4. Okay, defending the pawn. Queen went to d3, and then b4 was played. And white said, I'll just push through. And now I'll play b3. My queen will come into a square like a6 or b5, and black's problems still exist. So it still says even, but the position is becoming increasingly difficult for black to play because when you push pawns forward, you leave space behind and you don't control the squares they once controlled. So black went b3, all in for the attack, trying to double rooks. And that's the sign of a player who does not like their position. They think I'm going to lose this game if I do nothing. And Anna, check this out. Rook takes e6, step 1. Rook b8, okay, defending. Rook e2, good move. And look at this move. That's a winner. Queen a7. That's a beautiful way to win a game.
Very pretty. The king has this back rank problem, so if the queen takes the queen, well, then there's going to be rook e8 checkmate. Because the pawn on g6 is so strong, it's taking away those escape squares f7 and h7, so the king cannot escape, and that was a very beautiful tactic. And I think that what's really cool with this game is what you mentioned before, that perhaps if they just shuffle the pieces around, it's equal, but I thought that black's plan of pushing the pawns in front of the king made a lot of sense. And I think it's something that a lot of players would do because, you have to come up with some sort of plan, and pushing the pawns and creating an attack for the king makes a lot of sense. So I think it's really cool to see how that could backfire.
That's right. And even if we go back to this move 21, and as soon as you see this pawn here, you forever have to worry about your back rank. So the position became increasingly challenging for the black side because that king can never quite get out. So a queen trade would help you, but until those queens come off, your king's not running into the center of the board. And that's why I think white maintained the pressure and ended up winning the game. Unfortunately for Peter Lizak, the team did not move on, but it was an instructive moment nonetheless. And okay, we are getting set for the semifinals. I am excited for it. So we have just 2 matches in this round, 4 games. All 4 players in the team play only in 1 game. So Jan Napomischi will be taking on Anton Korbov in a matchup of the world's elite blitz players and rapid players, superstars. But Anna, if you're the rest of the team, right, you look at board 1, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen there. They can beat each other. How do you manage your own games while out of the corner of your eye looking at your teammates?
It's very difficult. I think it's something that you have to kind of balance it. You sort of want to know how the team is doing to, sort of understand what result your game needs to finish in, because obviously if all of your teammates have won, maybe you just need to make a draw for your team to win, which is the most important thing. But at the same time, if you're constantly focusing on everybody else's game, then you're going to stop focusing on yours. So I think that most players, what they typically do is that they just focus on their own game and they kind of take it as it comes. And then, if they perhaps are offered a draw or something, they'll see how the team has done. But I think that mostly they will be focusing on their own games.
Right. And it's difficult because You out of the periphery, you're looking, and looks like games are starting. So let's actually pull this up here. We have Jan Napomischi, the white pieces against Anton Korbov, and we have a French. So I am somebody who does not like the French defense very much because the bishop on c8 gets caught here. But Anna, maybe you have different feelings about this opening.
I don't play the French. I don't even play e4 as white, so I don't really see the French in a lot of my own games. But I think that I sort of feel the same way. That bishop on c8 does become really bad, and it becomes a bit difficult to play in that regard. But it's just preference. Some people really like to play it.
That's right. And the bishop on c8 doesn't get out. It's stuck behind the wall of pawns and pieces. But though black plays it because often the underlying structure is extremely solid. You have this pawn chain from f7 to d5 that makes your bishop worse, but your pawns feel safe. And this is still theoretical. So I think we can come back here in a bit. They will. This theoretical discussion will continue. They'll figure it out. Let's go on to Georg Meyer in the Gronke match against PT, because I was saying that this was the biggest advantage for Gronke, the grandmaster against international master, and Georg Meyer, a very strong grandmaster at that. But with the white pieces, Anna, do you just play solid chess and try to make a draw, or do you say, I don't care about your rating, it's an individual game, let's just play chess?
I am more of the second type. I like to just play out the games. I always want to play my best, and even if George Meyer is a very high rate player, obviously a draw for white here would be a good result. I think that you should just try to play out the game and see how it comes. But I think that that's also what he's going to try to do. We'll see.
And Georg is thinking, so that indicates to me he's considering the capture on f6 with the pawn. Otherwise, you would just take with the queen right away. And if you take with the pawn, that can give you some attacking chances, but it also gives you double pawns, which may not be the best situation. So Georg, very experienced in the French. He is maybe the leading expert in the French in the world. He is always playing it. It's his tried and true opening. And Anna, what do you think? Which way is he going to take on f6?
I think that g takes f6 is very interesting because of that idea of opening up the g file. And I mean, I'm not really used to these positions, but I think that that really does look very interesting. So perhaps he's gonna actually take with the g pawn. Perhaps taking with the queen is a little bit more solid, but I think it can lead to some very interesting positions.
I actually think that, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think being solid can backfire in a position like this.
Yeah.
And that's why he does take with the pawn. The great decision, because this bishop dominates the bishop on c8. This pawn b7 is under attack. So his main purpose in doing this is to try to play this f5 move. It's weird, right? We say this is more solid. Like, how could this be better? It's because if you try to take the solid approach after, say, a take on d4, I probably can take with the queen on d4, but I also can say, let's stop one move short. There could be a queen b5 check. Bishop takes b7. This king's in the center. And a move like that, staring in both directions, black is underdeveloped and white is fully developed with all the pieces flying.
Yeah, I definitely think that, just like you said, playing solid can backfire. And I think that's one thing. A lot of times when somebody's trying to play for a draw, the problem with playing for a draw is the fact that when you're just trying to just play solid and play for a draw, you typically play quite passive, and you can give your opponent a lot of chances. So that's why it's so important to always play actively, even if you want to draw in a game.
That's right. And I think that now, speaking of actively, f5 for black, bishop can come to g7. And that's in part why Georg takes with the pawn on f6. He can fianchetto this bishop, long diagonal to work with, and the king can still castle kingside. It's not unsafe over there. So let's keep in this match. Let's go to Elena Kashlinskaya on board 2. She's the free agent. This is a locked up position where white has the bishop pair, but this is your quote unquote extra bishop for one of these knights. That bishop can't find daylight, at least not for the time being, because look at black's structure. Very typical way to say, hey, it's not a disadvantage to have the knights.
Yeah, you can see this big block of pawns here in the center, which is blocking the bishop. But now perhaps the bishop is going to get a little bit more of light, perhaps, because now after d takes e4, well, it's giving a few more squares for the bishop, but we can definitely see that this bishop on g2 is not an amazing piece.
That's right. The knight on c5 is a good piece, and it can go to b3, attacks the pawn, attacks the queen. So I think that International Master Formancia said, all right, I don't want to open that bishop, as you were just highlighting, but maybe tactically it will work out for me. And as you see on the evaluation bar, it says it's a completely even position.
Yeah. This is another one of those, though, that I think that the eval bar says that it's an equal position, but there's just so much play here. This is gonna be a long game, and nothing is decided here
That's
at
right.
all.
Let's keep on in this match. We'll go to the next one with board 3. Hanna-Marie Kleck is board 3 for Granka Bank. We have Masruri Rahman, board 3 for PT. And what is going on with these pawns here? And for white, these pawns here. It's white's turn. Anna, help me out. Which pawn do we take? Do we have to take? Can we leave it? I'm confused.
I am very confused as well. That's the thing. When you have all of these pawns in the center and all of these traits, you just gotta think about, which pawn is the one that we should take. I think. Well, right now, I think that I kind of like taking on d5 because it's a pawn that is a little bit less protected, and I don't know if after knight takes there could be like perhaps I don't know like okay yeah c4 perhaps it's not good because knight d4 but okay it's taking on e5.
Having the same struggle that we are. I asked you the
Yeah.
question because I genuinely didn't know what to do. And he just says, I'm going to take on e5 rather than anything else. And it seems like with the series of trades, Black's position looks pretty nice to me. You already castled. And I don't know. I think that there's no opening disadvantage whatsoever.
Yep, I totally agree. Now, white castle, because they had to castle as quickly as possible, especially with all of the center getting open very soon. So it made a lot of sense that they castled. Robert, I have to ask you. We were talking about the French before, and I saw somebody say that you drew Anand with a French at some point. Is that true?
We don't talk about successes in the French defense on these streams. But it is true. I did have one good game in the French, so we'll leave it at that. But here, this position, I think a huge opening success for Hanna-Marie Kleck, and that's good news for Granke. And let's go to board 4 in Granke because that is Ina Agrest. Where is her game? There it is, against Chelsea Monaco. So two very strong players. These ratings, that's not their real ratings. They're like 2,300 each, not 2,100, but even the 2,100 level is very strong. So this position is very closed, but white can play for b4 at some point, trying to pry open the queen side. And if you go rook to b1, that could help you go after this b5 pawn. So I would say, Anna, the biggest problem for black, bad bishop, and white's pieces get a little more activity, and you can play on the king side to boot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's fun to see a Swedish player here that Ina is playing. It's really fun to see that. But I definitely think that in this position, our pieces are more active, and b4 immediately just seems like a very strong move because of this pin once again with the queen. So I think that b4 immediately just seems like a very active move and very strong, and that pawn on b5 could be under some pressure after an exchange. But we can see that she went for knight h4. She wants to place a knight on f5. I think it was Kasparov who said that a knight on f5 is worth a pawn. So knight on f5 are always really good. So it makes sense that she wants to transfer that knight there.
And she's realizing the tactics work in her favor because when I see knight h4 and the bishop on e7, I think, wait a second, my knight moves out the way, that knight can be captured on h4. But if I take either on d5 or e4, it actually doesn't really matter because there are several ways to win this. One is to go knight f5 and take this bishop with check. When you take the bishop on e3, you could also just play pawn takes a knight, and after bishop h4, my queen comes to h5 with a checkmate threat and the bishop under attack. So you would actually lose the piece here for black. Not recommended. And rook went to takes, one pair of rooks to come off. This knight coming to f5, g6 can be played, but then after g6, maybe that bishop gets into h6. So instead of rook a8, and I think you can even trade these rooks, plant this pony on f5, and say, I'm going to press forward.
Yeah, I think that the issue here is the fact that black pieces are pretty uncoordinated, but also very passive. We can see this bishop on a8 is not doing anything. This bishop on f8 is trying to defend a bit on the king side, and I think that white's pieces are just gonna start to attack and become very active, and I think it's gonna be hard for black to defend.
I agree. And the one thing you have to be careful about is a file, the only open file. So if black can quickly bring this queen down somewhere to attack the pawns, that could be a problem. But white's there first. And this b5 pawn's in trouble because you can't play c4. Your pawn is pinned. If you play b4, and she doesn't, but if she would b4, that c4 square would have been white's for the taking. And that's a great spot for the knight. So queen a5 played, attacking the c3 pawn. Ultimately, I think that's a pretty decent choice. But bishop takes b5 can still be played, and I like white's pieces. And maybe there's even after queen c3 an idea of like bishop c6, trying to encourage the trade, get a passed pawn.
Hmm. Yeah, black needs to try to find some type of counterattack, and obviously white still needs to be careful, but it seems as if white does have the better position here and the better chances for this game.
Certainly. And let's go to the other match. We have Jan Napomischi taking on Anton Korbov. We saw this early on in the French. Now we're in a queenless position where there's an isolated pawn on d5. That's not good news for Korbov. And you know what else is not good news, Anna? Look at the clock situation.
Very bad news, the clock situation.
I mean, what, 4 extra minutes for Nepo? And what do you think? Can Korbov hold off? He is a superstar. He's a super grandmaster. Does he have chances to hold this, even though it looks bad in the initial position?
I mean, chances to hold this, I definitely think he has, but he's going to probably suffer in this endgame because white's plan is always going to be to put as much pressure as possible on d5 by, perhaps going rook d1, perhaps even doubling rooks on d1. And also, we can see that white even has the c file open right now, so even white's pieces are more active than black's pieces in this position. So I definitely think that he's going to have a tough time, but holding it, I think that there are chances that he can hold this.
Yeah, I agree. It's a position where most players, they look at, when you talk about holding, this is okay for black, but I'm looking at Jan Nepomuchy. He is one of the world's best players. He's in the co-lead at the Candidates Tournament, which determines who plays Magnus Carlsen for the World Chess Championship. So I like white's position. As you said, let's go after this pawn on d5. And if the pawn moves, maybe that helps my knight get into this d6 square using this pawn on e5. I think white has a very nice position. Let's go to the second board here in this matchup. And here we go. Alexander Kadetsky with the black pieces against Evgeny Kretov. What's going on? Opposite color bishops, doubled pawns here. And the last one played was a5. I think we understand that. This bishop wants to do some work on the diagonal.
It does. It wants to find a nice square. And that b4 square is a nice square. There's no pawn that can attack it ever. So it's going to be able to stay there. There's also no other minor piece that could be exchanged for that b4 bishop. So it's going to be a very strong bishop. And now we can see that white is going for the queen exchange here.
I was about to say, the queen exchange indicates to me that white is probably, I'm not really playing to win this game. I would love to win the game. But if black takes, this c-pawn can't go. The bishop and the rook team up on a dark square. And perhaps that c-pawn becomes a weakness rather than a strength. The bishop can, of course, wrap around to the b5 square, all is protected. I think the most likely result by far is a draw because neither side will really be able to make too much progress.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's gonna be, just like you said, very hard to make any progress. It looks like a decent position for both of them, but it's difficult to know how exactly they are gonna be able to continue the game in a good way.
That's right. So let's keep on in this match. Board 3, Maxim Lavrov taking on Fyodor Mishakov. And okay, I see this knight on d5. I like that, but I also see it's under attack. And the material count, black is down a pawn, but has the bishop pair. And in particular, this bishop on c5 looks pretty nice for black. So if the material stays the way it is, white can claim an edge and push for more. But there's that active counterplay for black, at least some pressure going forward. So Anna, I would prefer white's position, but how big of an advantage would you say white has here?
I would say that white, well, they are a pawn up, but just like you said, black has some attack. It has this nice bishop on c5. Wow, they're going for h5 now. So I think that this is just a type of position where white just has to defend from any immediate threats. Like for instance, here h4 is an immediate threat, I guess. Perhaps. So I think that that's more what they have to do. But I think that in the long term, it's going to be fine for white. I can't really see black winning immediately here. So I think that white is doing pretty well, and I think that there's also a lot of resources for white to defend. Like this knight can go to f4 now, and all the pieces are sort of together around the king. So I think that white is doing pretty well here.
I'm with you, and I'm looking at the clock situation. An extra minute, still 3 minutes for black. That's plenty of time for experienced players, but that extra time could come in handy with the extra pawn. So h5 is a great move. It's alpha zero type of move.
Yeah.
Let's go h4. You can't take the pawn on h5 because your knight needs that bishop's defense. So h4 is the plan. Soften up the g3 square or plant the pawn on h3 for an attack. I think that black with that move, I'm starting to like the chances more. I still prefer White's position. Let's keep on in this match. The last board, we have Maria Komijina with the black pieces, and I see the eval bar in Black's favor. And it's because these pawns here are fantastic for Black. It's even material. White has this connect four pawn chain, but the pawns in the center are mobile, whereas White's pawns are stopped. None of them can move on the dark squares.
Yep, none of them can move, and this just looks very well, to be honest. These two pawns are going to be absolutely amazing. The F and E pawn, especially in an endgame. I think that E pawn is going to be super strong. And now they just took on H5. It just seems like they're up material, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah,
And
she's up one pawn, so this just seems very good.
it was an understandable mistake. H5 was played because you want to win the F5 pawn. I don't want my H pawn. I want this F5 pawn because then E4 is weak. But unfortunately, H5 comes with the cost of this rook. Black takes that very quickly. I will say that Black's position, while you're ahead in material, it could come under fire if you're not careful. Like if you allow this capture in E4, there could be some attack. But for starters, you have to deal with the bishop first. This knight can just sit on G5. So Black is well ahead. And if you play carefully, you should be able to take this point.
Yeah, that knight on G5 is going to be a very strong knight, and it's just going to protect the whole king.
Exactly.
And White cannot even go knight F3 to try to exchange it because of this pawn on E4. So that knight on G5 is just a monster.
It is indeed, and this would be a very good game for Spare to take over Spare Bank Trade Union. At first, I was going to say Spare, but then I realized they're kind of playing each other, so I can't just say that. And this game looks very good for Black. Let's keep on going throughout these games. I'm just going to pull one at random at this point. Let's go to Elena Kashlinskaya's game, where with the white pieces, she is down a pawn and her king is under attack. So Farid Fermancia with the black pieces. We saw the Caro-Kann, the bishop now has a diagonal to work with, but all the other pieces are gone, and Black's up a pawn with an attack.
Yeah, this is looking really, really, really great for Firmancia. I mean, Alina is completely restricted in the sense that her queen cannot really move anywhere. The queen is going to have to stay on the first rank to prevent the queen, Black's queen, from going to G1 and checkmate. So this, just because of that fact, just looks absolutely amazing for Firmancia. But also the fact that she's even a pawn up there.
Yeah, wow. Queen G5 played, protecting the pawn on G3. And if H6, where's this? Oh, okay, the bishop's under attack. So look at this. Grandmasters do blunder. H6 blunders the piece. I'm trying to distract the queen from G3, but I can't forget my bishop. So F6, that would potentially weaken the king if the queen can come to F3 and get some checks in. So you have to be very precise at a moment like this. You don't want to blunder like I just did. And one idea is Queen E1 to make sure that White's queen can't get back on the first ranks. Then you can play bishop to D4. I feel like Black should be able to get through. And by the way, Jan Napomischi, have to go to that game, has won his individual matchup against Anton Korbov. The final position was one where he got that rook into C7. He pushed that pawn to E6. That's bad news for the king on F8.
Yeah, no, that just looks super strong. We were talking about it before if Korbov was going to be able to defend his position, but it seemed like it was not due to the passed pawn or the isolated pawn that Korbov lost, but it was due to how great Nepo had all of his pieces and the very weak king that Korbov had, and also that pin there. So it seemed as if it was not just due to the isolated pawn.
That's right. And I'm going to go to this game here in the other match because I'm looking at this end game, and now Ina Agras, we loved her position earlier, but Chelsea Monica has found a way out of this. It looks like it's going to be an even trade. This pawn cannot be defended unless you put your knight on D6, and White will not take that knight, at least not yet. The king will come to G3. It should be a level position. So that's going to be, presumably, if all things hold, a draw on this board. I'm going to go to the Georg Meyer game where he's still playing. This is the most Georg Meyer position that you could possibly have. White, the engines is slightly better. Georg has under a minute left, but he has the bishop pair, so he's going to try to work his magic, play a nice end game here to try to take down his opponent. But this knight on d4 is such a problem for Black to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. Bishop a6. Okay, so he's trying to kick the rook away. I am very impressed. I mean, there's a big rating difference in this game, and I think that White is playing really well, and he's also up on time. So I think that I mean, Mohamed has been playing super well this game. Rook C7 is going back, and now we can see that he's trying to get this repetition of moves. He's trying to get a draw here. And maybe we're gonna see that because we can see that they're repeating at this
Oh,
moment. So the
and
game might finish right here.
if I'm Georg, I'm looking very quickly at other games. Even if I go down to 5 seconds left, I need to make sure my team doesn't need me to win. He's probably keeping an eye out. He makes a draw. Let's go within this match. And let's go to Elena Kashlinska. That's their board 2. Bishop on e4. This is under attack. Maybe can't play f6. You drop the pawn on g6. That's not something you want to do. But f5 could be a good idea. Although queen e7 check. As soon as you push his f pawn, your king gets in trouble. So you have to be precise here.
You have to be very precise. I thought that before it was quite interesting because it looked as if White almost had no moves. Like Black had their pieces in such a great position that it almost seemed like White cannot really move anything. It was almost like a zugzwang. So it's interesting to see how the position changed and how they got here. But yeah, this still just looks absolutely amazing for Mancha. I guess that she wants to. It's difficult when they already have their pieces in such a great position. But Queen A1. Okay, I was not expecting that move. I thought the bishop was gonna move instead.
And I would put my queen on e3 and ask you how you're going to beat me. And the evaluation went from -9 to now -1.3. But that's why engines can be so misleading. That position, I don't know what Black's best move is here. Like, this looks like a tough position because the queen defends, the queen attacks. You can't play f5 because of the checks. And queen a1 looks like a reasonable move. But after queen e3 and queen e2, the king feels safer. Now play queen g2, queen f3, try to trade the queens off the board. If those queens come off, White is not losing this game. Or I guess bishop g2 is just, hey, my king is tucked on h3 and safe. So somehow Elena Kashlinska, she is saving this one, at least for now. Let's go to some of the other games where we see, okay, we were looking earlier where Black was totally winning and Black still has a big advantage, but I'm looking at this d pawn as a potential problem for Black, especially as we approach time trouble. We're gonna have to bop around here. Ooh, okay, though, this king's in trouble. That's actually a great move.
The king is in trouble, yes. King g4.
Check right there. And if the king goes to h5, you get checkmated immediately. So rook f4, king h5, you go rook to e4, and that's game. Checkmate. You can't stop it.
That's a nice puzzle. That's very, very cool checkmate. Yeah, they're going. Yeah, she's going for rook f4 check here now. So we're gonna see where the king goes. King has to go to g3, and she's just gonna keep on checking.
And then this king comes into well, don't drop the pawn. You want to drop the pawn, but at some point soon the king can go to f6. The pawn can't move because e6 is hanging. I just saw Kornemai Hanna-Marie Kleck wins the game by resignation. She is up at rook, and you want to know how she's up at rook? Rook d8 was just played, and she took. So Hanna-Marie Kleck gets that win for Gronkia. That's huge, and what a slip! Because queen f8 looks like White's on the offensive, but she played g5, so her king can escape. Oh gosh, that's a sad turn of events for PT, and Gronkia must be thrilled.
Yep. We've seen some of those, and they really hurt those type of blunders, but they happen, and especially with little time. So let's go back to the game with Alina.
Did you see that? It was like -17, and king h6 was the wrong move, which means that somehow you probably should play the queen here and g5, g4, and go for some checkmate. But it's not. It's easier said than done. Maybe g5 right away is the way to go, and that's probably it. But it's hard to play move like g5 with 30 seconds on your clock. You worry about your own king, and now it's back to even. So for that one moment there, Black had it again, and Georg Meyer has made a draw. So Hanna-Marie Kleck wins the game. That means it's tied 2-1. So the worst that Gronkia can do is, I think the worst they can do is tie. But unless I'm mistaken. Because, oh no, they won. Wait, I'm now very confused by this. Inagris is still playing. So we'll see how that one finishes out. But right now, White on this board is doing okay. All the games are finishing at the same time. We have too much to deal with. Look at this game between Kadetsky and Kretov. Opposite colored bishops. We saw a player in the previous match, unfortunately, slip and allow the pawn to promote. This time, neither player allowing that, at least for now.
No, they're not going to make the same mistake again. That's a good thing. When you make one mistake, you start thinking more about like really preventing that from happening again. So I'm sure that they're not going to allow any pawn from promoting here.
And Spare is up 3-0. So it looks like this game, no matter who ends up victorious. If anybody, it's not going to make a difference for the match. Spare will move on, being Spare Bank Trade Union. Let's go back to the other match because that, of course, has much more at stake. Oh, sorry, I clicked on the wrong game. I was going here, but Black did win that game we were looking at earlier. So Farid Firmancha is still trying to win. He needs to win this game with Black. And I would even consider Queen F4 check right now. I'm not sure if that endgame holds, but it's a move to consider to trade the queens off because opposite color bishop endgames notorious for being drawn.
This is going to become a difficult game to play, though, I think, for both players. Black is trying to find that big advantage and finding a way to convert this to a win. And for White, it's going to be really difficult to play because the king is so unsafe. But now we can see that White has found a way to check the Black king, and now it seems almost as if Firmancha wants to exchange those queens.
Wait, but she should take that queen. Her team is up 2-1, if I'm not mistaken. I see that.
Yeah, she should definitely take that queen.
Ina Agres drew, Georg Meyer drew, and Hanami Kleck won. She just needs to draw, but she might not know that because she's in the middle of a time scramble. But she just needs to draw. Trade queens if you can.
Yeah, change queens and it's just immediately a draw with this.
Take it.
Take it.
No,
She's not doing it.
She's playing not for a win necessarily. Maybe she thinks that this is the easiest way to hold, but trading queens ensures that she makes a draw and her team moves on, and it looks like we'll get a repetition. So she gets away with the decision not to trade queens if the repetition is happening.
We don't get a repetition. Wow. But it seems as if, yeah, there we go.
There was nothing that Black could do to escape. So Elena Kashlinska, she did not win her game. Hanami Kleck did win for Gronke. They went 2.5, 1.5. But she might be the hero. If you just looked at the scorecard, you say, well, the player who won is the hero. Elena Kashlinskaya was completely busted according to the engine, but it was much more difficult than met the eye. It's like to find that win. It's like, where is it? We were looking. There was no clear way, but there was at that one moment. I don't even know what move it is. This game finished at 92 moves, somewhere around these parts. Maybe it was even actually earlier than this. I got to find this moment where the king was going back up in H3 and H2. I guess G5. That's the move.
There we have it.
Giving up your H5 pawn because G3 is checkmate. The bishop and the queen line up on the square. If you don't do anything, G4 check will win. And if you trade and say, okay, I can't allow G4, that's too scary. Let me move my king back. A move like H4 should be good, but actually G4 is even stronger because your queen has to move and your queen cannot stay in line with the G3 pawn. Hard to see this with 30 seconds though.
Very difficult to see it, especially because G5 really does change the whole dynamic of the position. Whenever you move a pawn in pretty much any position, it really does change it really does change the whole position, the dynamic of it. So it's really hard to see that with 30 seconds, even though it was a very good tactical move. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure that perhaps she'll be a bit upset of not finding it, but that's just how it is sometimes with little time.
Yeah, and he had a good game. He was playing well with the black pieces, and Queen B7 check, right? That's why you don't play a move like G5. You don't want this king to get checked too much, but that's only one check, and the king can escape on a dark square, and that's the end of your checks. And on the other side, I'm going to check and go for a checkmate. So
yeah, very difficult to analyze this though with the little time and to realize that there's no checks left in that position. But
yes, because the fear is if you make this pawn push, immediately becomes a draw. And on the other hand, by the moves that he was playing with the black pieces, he was trying to keep the momentum, saying, okay, I'm going to keep this position. The status quo is good enough for me because I will be able to make progress later. Whereas if I allow an immediate perpetual check or some kind of queen trade, then I have no chances. But ultimately, it was a missed opportunity. PT does not win their match. It's not on International Master Firmancha here. It's a team effort. And PT, they just barely made it to the semifinals. Unfortunately, they're barely eliminated in this round. So we know our final two teams. We have our final two teams. This game, by the way, ended in a draw. Just for a reminder, everyone, it was a repetition. Our final two, we have Gronke Bank and Spare. So as you look at this, we know that Georg Meyer tops the lineup for Gronke Bank, Jan Napomischi for Spare. So strong grandmasters on board one. I mean, strong is an understatement, but exceptional grandmasters on board one. And then IMs on board two. The lowest board is still well near 2,300. Anna, what do we expect?
I think that anything can happen here. It's going to be such a close match, and it's going to be so exciting to follow this final. I really cannot wait. It's going to be super exciting as well to follow this Georg Meyer. versus Nepo game. It's going to be really, really, really amazing to follow such a high level chess game. George just drew versus Nepo won, so perhaps Nepo is feeling a bit more confident. But once again, anything can happen here, and they're both amazing rapid and blitz players.
And if you're Jan, you just beat Anton Korbov, one of the world's top players. You're feeling
Yeah.
good, like you said. And to remind everybody, there will be 2 games. So you play your first match, then there's a rubber match. Well, actually, that's not a rubber match, but there's a second match where it's 8 games total. So unlike the previous rounds where we've been best out of 4, it's best out of 8. Your team needs to score 4.5 points throughout the 2 rounds to win the match. So we are going to take a break, but before we do, just want to remind everybody, if you can, please click that panel, do donate if you're able. This event is to raise awareness, to raise money for charity, and for some great causes. And for FIDE, they are trying to do more for players with disabilities, for some of the elder players, for the veterans, and for chess and education. So it's very important if you can. We have received many generous donations to this point. Thank you so much for this, and we will be back shortly with more coverage of the FIDE World Corporate Chess Championship. Welcome back, everybody, to the FIDE World Corporate Chess Championships. This is the final. We have 2 teams remaining. We will see action begin at 10 minutes past the hour. We want to remind everybody of what the format is now that we have reached the final. It's a bit different than the quarters and the semis because the players will play 2 matches. You get the white color and the black color against the same opponent. And if it is a 4-4 tie, we will go to a tiebreak blitz match, 3 minutes plus 2-second increment. Anna, what if the final is determined by Armageddon?
That would be, for us, absolutely amazing. For us commentators and for everybody else watching, that would be absolutely amazing. But for the players, I think that would be very stressful because, as we said before, Armageddons are stressful enough by themselves. But an Armageddon in a team, it's a lot more stressful because there's so much pressure. And yeah, I think that we would feel better about it than them.
That's true. We enjoy it. It's fun for us as commentators, but as players, it's nerve-wracking. And let's remind everyone what is at stake because it is a chess competition, glory, playing better chess, sure, but there are prizes. So the winning team is declared the FIDE Online World Corporate Chess Champion. I think that much is fairly straightforward. And the first 4 teams in the rankings secure 4 seats each to participate in a simul against the winner of the candidates. We do not know who the winner of the candidates is. That tournament will resume in April, and that could be Maxime Vacher-Lagrave or Jan Napomischi, who's taking part in this. They're the co-leaders, or it could be Fabiano Caruana, Anish Giri, etc. And 4 players from each of the highest-ranked teams who did not qualify for the playoff stage will be able to play against Ju Wen-jun. That's a really exciting experience, Anna.
Very, very exciting. I think that all of these prizes are super exciting, especially for the people in the corporations that perhaps haven't had the opportunity to meet all of these top elite players. It would be a really cool experience.
That's just a lot of the players are thankful just to be taking part, and the last part of this is, of course, for the charity, and that's a big component of this. It's just, there's chess playing. Everyone in the event loves chess. That's why they're taking part in this. But you see, the team that raised the most money will be invited to the World Championship match held later in 2021. That will be between Magnus Carlsen and the aforementioned winner of the FIDE Candidates Tournament. So you have 3 nights, VIP tickets. That will be a fantastic experience. And there are many players enjoying this competition, not just the players who are left remaining. And we have a tweet showing appreciation, and it is from Vinesh Jetva, whose game we're analyzing in detail yesterday because he played a great one, 1300 rated, was playing in someone who was 2100 plus, and actually had a great position outplaying, I should say, his opponent. And you see the tweet here: best game I played to date in my chess career. What a moment to see my game getting featured on an official live stream of this elite event. Can't express how it feels to outplay a professional title player with a much higher rating than you. Thank you. Well, thank you. We're glad you participated. It's a very nice to see that you enjoyed your experience. It is the first FIDE World Corporate Championship held online. I presume it will not be the last. Let's hope it's not. And we'd like everyone's participation. And we have just 2 minutes before the round begins. So I wanted to talk about this end game. And when you're calculating this late stage of the game, don't have much time. If you're black, how do you determine, just on like a conceptual level, whether to trade rooks and promote your pawn and calculate the ensuing king and pawn endgame?
It's a very difficult thing to do, especially like you said with the little time. I would say that, I mean, obviously it depends on like the king's position. So in this position, the king on g1 is holding this f1 square. So the pawn on f2 could promote very soon. But then at the same time, you can see that the king that is going to f7 is going to be able to walk all the way to d7 and protect c7, and then that king is going to be, after the bishop sacks itself or has to take the pawn on c7. Yeah, you can put out the moves there so to make it a bit more clear. Then you sort of have to calculate this position where the king will be closer to taking that a pawn than the black king will be able to either protect the pawn or take the a4 pawn. So I think that in this position, you just sort of have to calculate if that king and pawn endgame is going to be winning. And that is something that it's a bit different with an a pawn because there are all of these stalemating ideas. Okay, we're gonna get the game started.
Yep, too bad. We were talking. That's my fault. Didn't
Yeah.
bring it up in time. Was reading the tweet, but the games are beginning. We don't want to miss the action. We can talk about the rest of that end game later. Georg Meyer starts with the white pieces against Jan Napomischi. We see knight f3 and c4, an English opening system by Georg. We will have our eyes on all 4 games, and it's the first of 2 matches, everybody. So only 4 boards. We know exactly who's playing. Gronke against Spare. And this is the heavyweight matchup on board 1, but equally important are some of these other games. So it's still very early on. I don't think we need to hop around just yet. But Anna, I always like these bishops on g2. I just am a big fan of the fianchetto.
I'm a big fan of the fianchetto as well, as long as there's not a big massive pawns blocking the bishop in the center. But in this position, that's not the case. The bishop on g2 has the full diagonal, and it's a very active piece. So I definitely prefer that bishop on g2 over the bishop on d7. Although the bishop on d7 could at some point exchange itself for that bishop, but that's another story.
No, that's relevant. It's definitely a relevant detail. You often want to trade off this powerful bishop. And the bishop came to d7 to protect the knight on c6. You say, protect the knight on c6? No, you're not going to take that. But there are moments where you do take, if black is forced to take with the pawn, to shatter the structure on the queen side. But look at Jan. I mean, f6. You're creating a pawn chain here. This knight can come to e6 potentially. He can castle kingside. I do like this bishop. White plays f4 to strike in the center. And, Georg's position, to my eyes, is favorable, but Jan playing quickly and confidently, and it's going to be a messy game.
It's going to be an amazing game to follow. I'm so excited about this game, and it's really, I mean, these are just 2 top players. It's going to be such a high quality chess game, and I'm super excited to see what they bring to the table.
And strong players on all 4 boards. Less excitement if I bring up this game between Elena Kashlinskaya and Alexander Kadetsky, because the queens are off the board. Nothing major has happened except for the queen trade and the move a6 played by Elena, allowing this bishop to take the knight, because those double pawns won't be here for very long once black takes in the center. So the bishop pair, we hear about that all the time. Isn't that just a good thing for black to have the bishop pair? Yes, it is. But even though the pawns will not remain doubled, they could be attacked. And oftentimes, white wants to put a knight on b3 and try to take over these dark squares on the king side. The pawns on a6 and c6 leave squares here available for white to try and take advantage of.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, just like I said, even though bishop pairs, we hear about them all the time and they are great. I mean, it also like kind of depends on the position and if the bishop pair, if the bishops are going to be good in a certain position. So, I don't know, would you say that the bishop pair is strong in this position, Robert, for black?
I would take white's position because of the lead in development, and that's part of it. And this bishop on the light squares, that's the problematic piece.
Yeah.
If this may be a bit hard to recognize for many, but if black has to trade these pieces for these pieces, so the bishop and knight for white, the dark square bishop and the knight for black, this light square bishop is very bad against a knight because of the dark square holes on the queen side. So this is what you need to think about as you grow as chess players. What pieces do we want traded, and how can I take advantage of some of my opponent's weaknesses? Having a knight against a bishop, that knight can go from color to color, and a knight on a dark square cannot be attacked by a light square bishop.
Exactly, and those are the advantages and disadvantages of having a bishop pair, or having knights instead. So it all depends on the exact position.
That's right. And well, this position still early. Players are thinking, let's move on to board 4 for a second. Maria Komiagina with the white piece and Ina Agrest, and solid thus far. We started in a Spanish that looks sort of like an Italian because not too many pieces have been traded. This bishop is, well, not too many, no pieces have been traded. The bishop's on the diagonal towards the enemy king. This knight can come to g3 or e3, as it happens in the Italian very often. So, Anna, are we going to see a captured next move for white, or are we going to have to wait a few more for pieces start getting traded?
It's pretty uncommon that 13 moves go and there's been no trade whatsoever. But yeah, I'm not sure if I don't think that black is going to want to trade on a4, because when black trades on a4, what happens then is that the a file gets open for the rook, and that a6 pawn could be in some trouble at some point. Although what is also true is that the b file becomes open. So there are goods and bads, but I don't really think that they're gonna take yet. I think that they would rather reinforce that pawn on b5, and that's what Inagris is doing by going c6.
That's right. And white can take on b5 at any moment. It's not like black is going to take on a4, as you were saying. So that's why instead of capturing, we see d4. Well, now other pawns can be captured. But does white want to take on e5? Does black want to take on d4? These are difficult questions to answer at first glance. Taking on d4 allows white to get these strong pawns, and you don't have a pawn on the e5 blocking. So essentially, you give white two pawns in the center to your one. That typically is an advantage for the side with the two, because those pawns can push, and pawns in the center restrict pieces very well. So I don't think that will be taking on d4 to try to figure out another way. Even though e takes d4 is not a blunder, it's not that big of a deal. It just becomes a difficult strategic battle after that.
Maybe something that black would want to do is to go c5 to just try to get a little bit more control of the center so that this 2 versus 1 thing doesn't happen.
I like the idea of c5 for sure. She plays queen e7 first, and she's just keeping the status quo. I would jump my knight to g3, try to land that knight on f5, because even if it's captured, if I take with the e pawn, my rook wins the battle against your queen down the e line. So knight g3, standard move, regardless of the position, but I think it has more punch right now with the follow-up being knight f5. I think that white's position is good. But let's move on to the one game we haven't checked out yet between Hanamarie Klek, the sole victor for Gronka Bank in the previous round in the semifinals. She takes on Maxime Lavrov. And I have to admit, I really like white's position. This was the 4 knights game, and the bishop on d3 looks really good staring at the h7 square now that we're trading off this knight on f6.
Yep, that knight on f6 is typically the big defender on this h7 checkmate, and we can see that bishop on d3 is pointing right at h7, and probably is going to be joined by the queen very soon as well. And well, the issue here becomes as well that if g6 is ever played, well, then the h6 pawn is going to become very weak, and that black's pieces seem to be a little bit uncoordinated to defend on the king side. So for instance, rook on b4, although it is attacking on c4, it's also not really helping out on the defense, and I think that soon black's pieces are going to have to defend.
That's absolutely correct. And this pawn d5 is under attack because the queen helps out. So white is threatening to win a pawn, but more importantly, the attack, because you could take on c4 thinking, wait, I can win your pawn. And after pawn takes, oh, let me take with that bishop here. And you're going to see the eval bar. Yep, I knew that was coming, because this is a blunder. And the reason why is, look at this situation. Pieces are in a row, looks defended, but I can even make a move like queen to h4, potentially a queen to c5 type of move. And the reason why queen c5 can be played is there are so many pieces under attack, including this rook on f8. Just to show you a sample variation, if you go queen b6, I have bishop h7 check as a possibility. Your king can take, and the queen takes this rook here. White can steal some material with an attack to boot.
Yeah, very nice line. So you can see that the rook on b4 being unprotected could become a weakness for black. And I also think that quite soon we're going to be seeing a rook lift perhaps for white. Those rooks, I think, are going to start getting into the game.
Yes, rook e4, rook e3 type of moves.
Yep.
I would take back here. I think you should probably deal with the pawn first.
Yep.
Although I was talking about the pin, rook e4 is a possibility because this rook is hanging. Queen h4 or queen g4, one of these types of moves is possible, trying to pin this pawn. But queen c5 played, going for the check.
Going for the check, yes. And the question then becomes, can black just take on d3 and say, all right, we're giving an exchange, we're sacrificing an exchange, but that pawn on d3 could become strong, and this is our best shot, basically.
Yeah, it actually doesn't hate it. This advantageous for white, but we knew that going in. At least that gives good compensation, as the bishop will stay protecting it. I think that it's going to be a relatively easy game for white, not to win, but just to play going forward. You can blockade the pawn on a dark square, bring your other rook maybe into e7, so white has the upper hand, but it will not be an easy conversion. So the queen c5 is a very good move. I'm just looking at the other games to make sure we're not missing anything substantial. The game's still going on, some of them close positions. I'm going to quickly hop to this game. We'll come right back. I see a lot of trades. So white has the rooks on the e file, very good rooks, but bad pawns. So it's the eval bar says black is slightly better. I look at this, think that white has a pretty good initiative going on. Whose position would you take, whites or black?
I would take whites from just the first glance. because it seems that white just has so active pieces. But I guess that the reason why they feel like black is a bit better, do you think it's because of white's pawn structure?
It must be, but I think it's easier to blunder as black. Rook c7 falls into knight a6. You can't kick
Yeah.
my knight out of the c5 square. My rook's on the e file, hitting the c6 pawn. I think white's in no danger whatsoever right now. I would prefer the position. And if we trade the rooks, this is high level, but if you can visualize, say these rooks are gone, all four rooks, there could be an outside pass pawn situation that I can throw through. So that's later in the game. I want to go back to this game because the tactical moment was avoided. Rook b8 played, the very safe move, defending this rook so bishop h7 doesn't work. Pawn takes c4. I still prefer white's position thanks to this bishop. The bishop on a6 is not nearly as strong, but perhaps black is one move away, just one, from surviving this initiative. And maybe it could be rook to d8 or rook to e8, one of these rooks here.
Yeah, very close, but perhaps they are close enough to be able to survive this. So yeah, it seems like it looked better before than what we have right now. But as you said, I think that white is a little bit better as well because of this bishop, and perhaps because, I don't know, if the rook goes to d8, for instance, and we see something like queen f5, I guess that the idea is then just to go g6, right? And that's the way of defending.
You were right to point out when the queen is on h5, g6 was not possible, but you wait till the queen goes away. Now the pawn is not under attack. So it looks like you can parry the immediate threat. And I will just say at this moment here, it felt like the tactical ideas were working better than keeping the material equal. So I would have gone for pawn takes c4. I didn't calculate it all through, but it looked like a position where black would have had a difficult time trying to stave off all the threats. But queen f4 played. That gives up the c6 pawn. It also gives up the a7 pawn. So maybe it's the right choice. Henry Collect says, all right, I kept the tension alive. I didn't give up material. And now she can scoop off either pawn. I would take on a7. I like that pawn to capture.
Yeah, it feels like the c6 pawn is always going to be a weakness anyways. And also if you take the c6 pawn, you're opening up the c file, which could perhaps lead to a rook putting some pressure on the c4 pawn. So it seems like it's just very natural to take the a7 pawn.
And she goes for the rook lift. Look at that. You mentioned the rook lift earlier. She had pawns. I'm not going for the pawns. I'm going for the king. And this pawn isn't going anywhere. This pawn won't be captured next because the bishop will go to d7. But that a7 pawn's a problem. And rook g4 looks pretty scary too.
Yeah, so she's going for the king attack and for the rook lift. But I think that at some point taking those pawns has to be really good as well.
Agreed. And let's go to the top board. I'll keep an eye on this one between Georg Meyer and Jan Napomischi, because in that game, I just see way too many pieces to know what's going on. All four minor pieces, both sides have those. 6 pawns each. I thought that there were more pawns because I saw these bishops and I assumed one of them was a pawn. But no, those are bishops. The bishop on g3, I think we can agree, not exactly a very powerful bishop. The bishop on g2, full length and diagonal, but empty space. And one of the main questions I have is, can white at some point play e4? Well, that pawn was just taken. Didn't even see that pawn was hanging. I was looking at the center and all the pieces. Jan takes the pawn, but the engine didn't love it.
Robert, maybe now that the queen is gone, maybe now e4 could be an idea. That's what you were mentioning, and perhaps you can just go e4 now. Okay, you're going for rook a1 first to put some pressure on a7 as well.
The main drawback of e4 is that the d4 square, but there's no knight d4 because after knight takes d4, our queens stare at each other. Yours is not defended, and my knight can recapture on c2 if you take my queen. So that's probably part of the reason why e4 was available there. And instead, Jorg puts the rook on a6. That rook darts over to the queen side, cements the pawn in place, attacks this knight on e6, keeping the queen tied down. And I don't see a plan for black. That's part of the problem. Bishop f7. What is this? I've never seen a configuration like this before.
Very interesting. George just offered a draw right after rook a6, and Ian, by going bishop f7, declined that draw.
I don't know, who thinks they're better. Maybe both sides just think it's interesting. There is a second match, right? So even if you lose a game now, your team can still come back. By the way, Elena Kashlinska and Alexander Kadetsky have drawn their game on board too. We thought that was pretty level. So knight d6 played by Georg. The c5 pawn's now under attack. The bishop is under attack. Pressure on f5. But then again, the evaluation bar says that wasn't the best move. Like, you had something better, but why is that not a good move? just the calm bishop g8.
Look at that bit. I mean, this whole configuration of pieces is just so interesting how they're all kind of together on the king side, almost no pieces on the queen side. I haven't seen something like this, to be honest.
No, and what the way I would define this position is headache inducing because I don't know what to do as there's too many pieces. I want to trade something. I feel like I need to be quick here if I'm white. And Georg says, I'm not going to be quick on play h3. I don't know the exact purpose of that move. It does give the king a square off the back rank, but this bishop on g3 remains a problem. So I think that Jan, if he's careful, he can have the upper hand here, but for now it's too crowded, the board. So I'm going to go to Ina Agrest's game. She's playing on board 4, so let's go there. She's taking on Maria Komegina. And speaking of rook lifts, if you take on e3 or now take on b6, there could be a rook lift at some point. But that
Look at that. There we go.
Rook a7. This rook can go to d6 to take the d file. Whose rooks are going to be better in this game, Anna?
That is a great question. I don't really see how the rooks on the a file could immediately cause any problem. I mean, they are great on the a file, or they look great on the a file, but I'm not really sure where they're going, to be honest.
Right, the f7 pawn, you can't attack it because this pawn on c4 is such a annoying piece. Your bishop on c2 doesn't look very good, and one rook on d8, the other rook come to d6. This bishop can develop out here, and this knight on h4. Is it happy here? It wanted to go to f5, but if it does, black can just snap it off the board. So queen e2 play to get the queen safe, and I think rook to d6 makes sense. Try to land that rook on d2.
Yep, I think that rook d2 is a much bigger threat than any rook in the a file could create anytime soon. But okay, she's going queen c5 instead. She's going queen c5 instead.
And that sets up rook to d6. And so instead of blocking the queen in, this queen is already active on c5. It attacks that rook on a7. So I think white has to be careful here. Maria, she is up over a minute on the clock. That's good news for her. But Ina is starting to seize the initiative. Her pieces are getting active. Rook a5 puts pressure on this b pawn. But that b pawn is very well defended. Not a big deal. I think you could still slide the rook to d6 and try to play for more. So let's move on quickly to the game that we were looking at in detail. Hanamir Kluck, I saw this at the corner of my eye, which is why I had to go here. Look at this position. Look at the eval bar. You say, wait, why is it so good? Isn't this just a position where it's even material? After queen takes c6, which just played, where's that bishop going? Right?
Bishop cannot really go anywhere because if bishop c8, the rook on a8 is hanging.
The rook on a8 is hanging, so the bishop can't go to c8 to save it. The bishop's under attack. That leaves him like queen a5. Queen d2 played to attack the rook and the bishop on d3. But here comes this rook. Here comes the second rook. And rooks in the 7th rank are just devastating.
They absolutely are. They're going to be completely devastating. So many rook lifts we've seen today, Robert. Okay, maybe not a rook lift yet, but
rook takes f7.
Have the potential of seeing them.
Rook f7, sacrificing for checkmate. I think that's the way to go here. Just take on f7, remove the defender of the g6 pawn, and I don't think that black can really survive. I guess black will sacrifice the queen, or actually maybe after rook f7, this queen takes d3, so I should be a little more careful with that. Wow, this is a little more complicated than thought. So maybe just rook e3. That's rook left, second rook left. Oh.
Maybe there was an opportunity after queen takes d3. I don't know if you could go queen e7, because then that 7th rank was really vulnerable, but I'm not sure. Perhaps there was a way of defending that.
The engine justifies it. +6, even though you're down a piece for a couple pawns. So if rook takes f7 had to be the move. I kind of talked myself out of it, but rook b1, rook e8, and all of a sudden black's trying to fend off the attack and attack the queen instead, but queen d5 puts more pressure, and there's pressure in all directions. This rook on 8 still under attack. The pawn on f7 is threatened. No, this queen d5, queen c6 also good. Same idea as before.
Yeah, and now Maxime, I mean, he's getting into very low time. He has 45 seconds left, so he's gonna have to play fast. It really feels like Hannah just has the very big advantage, both with the position but also with the time. So it's probably gonna be a, I don't know, can we say that it's gonna be a win here? Can we say that already? I'm scared of saying that because I feel like I'm gonna jinx it, but
yeah, I think we can say that, and especially right now. Bishop takes g6, the queen comes over. This king has no defenders. So a nice game here by Hanamir Kluck. She was the reason Grunke moved on by winning her game. Her opponent dropped a rook unexpectedly. But if she wins this, she's showing that, hey, I'm here and I'm ready to help our team to the championship. And if she plays bishop takes g6, I think the game will, and there it is, the game will be over in just a few moves. Rook f8 doesn't even help. You can still take on f7 because this rook on a8, that's been a problematic piece this whole way through.
Yeah, it definitely has. And we're finally seeing a sack, and yeah, rook e1 now, but the king can just escape to h2. There's not really any big issue there.
And now everything's hanging. The bishop on a6, the rook on a8, the pawn f7. And if you take on g6, I can even just take back and mate you. Just, okay, rook g3 is probably good. G3 is also good. There are no bad moves in this position.
No, absolutely not. Can see here that, yeah, the rook is hanging. I mean, everything is hanging. This is just one of those type of positions. And he only has 5 seconds left.
Yes.
So
we have to go to, speaking of 5 seconds, after this game concludes, or maybe right now, got to go to Georg Meyer against Jan Napomischi, because that game, we know this one's going to be over in White's favor. This game, barely getting that rook back to defend the last rank. Georg has 8 seconds, and he's unfortunately down a pawn. So it looks like the other game did just conclude in White's favor. And now Georg trying desperately to hold here. He's down a pawn. His king is weak. He has 9.5 seconds. Anna, can he do it? Doesn't look like it.
I don't think so. I think this is looking very, very tough. I mean, he's a great blitz player, but 7 seconds is extremely hard. And that b pawn is just pushing. Although now, well, rook b6. But I don't know if you can even go b2. Yeah, exactly. Very beautiful move.
What a way to try to finish this game. If that queen was captured, the rook would take back and it would have been supporting the queening square. So now, whoa, both players missing things. You saw that eval bar drop like crazy. And that must mean, oh my gosh, could have taken on b2. The bishop was pinned.
Oh, wow.
Missed the chance there to take the pawn. And now rook b8 happens and you're in a losing position.
And you're resigning, yeah.
Wow. Just to show that everybody, what a sequence here. b2, if you take the queen, the rook replaces it. Can't stop me from promoting. The best you can do is sacrifice your queen for the new queen. And after what was played, b2, when the queen went to f5 here, queen c7, this pawn could be captured. The bishop is pinned. So missed opportunity. Let's go to the final game that's still going. The score is 1.5, 1.5. And this position, oh my gosh, it's
wow. Final game with 1.5, 1.5. That's very exciting. All stakes are on this game.
And, you know, they will, no matter what, get a second match. But you're right. Having the lead, taking control of the match, going to the second one, this looks promising for white at this point, but don't take this pawn too soon. There's g5 check, which would be a fork. Maybe e5. I would try to play for e5 there.
Yeah, now the knight is stopping any e5 type of move.
But she had g5. I understand with not that much time, playing any kind of pawn move can be worrisome, but look at the eval bar. Turning in black's favor all of a sudden. Maybe this rook will slide to a6 and use the open file.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're both just trying to get there. And now g5.
The h3 pawn that was hanging.
And h3 pawn is hanging.
She doesn't have much time though. Rook takes, but h3 is still hanging. And you don't want to drop that pawn. So
no, she's defending it.
But that's not a good move. I mean, you don't want it was you had to defend it, but it's not a move you want to play. And this rook is in. Rook g1, rook g3. Anybody?
Very nice.
Bring that rook up. Rook g1 now. She's playing rook f1. She needs to find rook g1.
She's not finding rook g1. Are they going to go back and forth?
Oh my gosh, she's
position. And that's
a huge shame for Ina Agra. She actually had the upper hand here. She didn't have much time, and you get nervous. You're playing for your team. But when this rook comes to g1 and to g3, down goes h3. It attacks the pawn c3. And black is probably already winning objectively at this point. You see the evaluation showing in black's favor. And you can't really blame her. She doesn't want to lose the game. That would be the worst thing. She played well with the black pieces. In the next set of games, she gets the white pieces. So maybe she's drawing with black, you know, as a result for the team. That's a good thing. 2-2, Anna. We could not have a closer match.
It's so close. And now I can actually say that all stakes are going to be on this very last match. It's going to be so exciting to follow all of these games. And I mean, I really can't wait.
Yes, and I'm just trying to get confirmation on when the next round is to remind you all to stay put. Don't go anywhere. It's 2-2. We're not getting into blitz just yet. We will have another set of these rapid time control games, and the next one will be in 15 minutes at 50 past the hour, so 10 minutes before the next hour. That will be when the next games take place, which means we are going to go on a short break. But before we do, just a reminder that this event is about raising awareness, raising money for great initiatives, for players with disabilities, for veteran chess players, and for chess and education. So if you can, please do show your support. Your generosity is appreciated. So many of you have been taking part and giving donations. It is seriously, thank you from the bottom of my heart. But for now, and I will take a break. When we return, we'll come back for the final match of the final of the FIDE World Corporate Chess Championship. Welcome back, everybody, to the FIDE World Corporate Championship. This is the finals. Anna, we had a break. We were relaxing for a little. Do you think the players could relax at all?
I think that they're nervous. This finished up in 2-2, so everything is set for this very last match. This match is going to decide who the winner of the FIDE Online World Corporate Chess Championship is. So it's going to be a very exciting match, and I'm really looking forward to it.
What would you have done if you have a break between matches? Would you prepare at all, or would you just try to erase chess from your mind for a few minutes, take a breath of fresh air, just like go to the window, maybe just eat something? How do you approach this? Preparation or relaxation?
I would say relaxation. I mean, I know that I get nervous, so I would probably have ended up preparing something anyway. It's sort of like with an exam, you just, you know that you should not be studying 5 minutes before the test when you're walking into a room, but you end up doing it anyway. But I think that really the best thing is just to relax, take something to eat, maybe bring a glass of water, get some air, whatever it is that makes you relax, because then that will really just set you in the mood for the game, I think.
For sure. And we'll remind everybody of how we got here, which teams are remaining. It is Gronke Bank taking on Spare in the finals. You see half because they split the first match. It's 2-2 of the 4 games. Gronke defeated Anahuac and also PT in that. Oh, that was a tough finish for PT. And on the other side of things, Spare defeats ERG and then beats Spare Bank Trade Union, which was led by Anton Korbov, another super grandmaster. So Spare with Jan Napomischi on the top board, Gronke, Georg Meyer. But honestly, this has been about some of the other boards, and that's what happens in team events. It's not just the super grandmaster at the top. No, Hannemarie Kleck has had a great showing. She won in the semifinals. She just won the first game of the finals. So she's been the MVP for Gronke.
Absolutely, absolutely. So really, you cannot just look at one board and decide from that board, who's the strongest player, that's the team that's going to win. No, this is a team championship and it's all about the 4 boards. So, Robert, do you have any prediction or sort of do you know who you think that's going to win, or how are you feeling about this last match?
Yeah, I have a prediction for you. Chess is going to be played. That's my prediction. And we see the Gronke team on screen here. And for those of you wondering, every single team gets one free agent. And Grandmaster Georg Meyer, the #1 player for this team, he works at Gronke. So he is not the free agent. A lot of the teams with Grandmasters, that's the free agent. But no, here it's Elena Kashlinskaya, who was brought in at the rating 2494. You're only allowed one player over 2500. So they chose her at 2494. She's very experienced, very well prepared, super strong, is a great person as well. So I think she's proven to be a fantastic addition to this team. And for Georg and the crew, one match, 4 games remain, and the games are starting. Jan Napomischi gets the white pieces against Georg Meyer. He did beat Georg. He's beaten Anton Korbov before that. So he has proven that he is an elite player, and he's doing the best he can for Spare.
Absolutely. We're seeing here the game starting. They've switched the board, so now Ian is playing with the white pieces. So we're gonna see some new openings and new repertoires. But I feel like we've seen a lot of bishops on G2 this championship, or at least today. Feels like almost every bishop has gone to G2, and there's been a lot of fianchettos. So we're seeing another one in this game with G3, bishop G2.
Yeah, this bishop came to G2, the long diagonal, the bishop on C8 will not be quite as strong. And the queens are traded. That does not mean it's just equal or boring. Black's can have a tough time finishing development. Bishop comes to G2, it attacks this pawn on B7, and black can castle queenside, but sometimes you castle queenside without queens on the board, and there still is a potential attack. White has an extra pawn on the queen side, so after bishop G2, you can think about A4, pushing some pawns up the board, and if the king goes to C8, perhaps the black king will find safety, but it won't be that easy.
Nope, it won't be that easy. And that's a really good point that you're making, that, white has one extra pawn on the queen side. So sometimes you can sort of think about that for in games. For instance, a lot of times when the king is castling on the king side, and the king is really far away from the queen side, that extra pawn on the queen side could really make a difference when entering an endgame. We can see now that the king has castled queen side.
No, but that's a good point and an illustration of that is those pawns can start pushing. And you would say black should have the advantage. Oops, I didn't mean to take the pawn. Black should have an advantage because of the pawn on e6. And that's a pawn in the center. But the problem is creating a pass pawn for black is much more difficult in these endgames because the king is closer to the center. You want to keep the king close to the center of the endgame. So a4 is played by Jan. He also has ideas of knight b5, bishop f4. And if you're not careful for Georg, you could find your king falling victim to an attack. So let's keep on going. Let's go to board 2. Elena Kashlinskaya is taking on FIDE master Alexander Kadetsky. And, well, she is just locked into the screen here. That's what happens when you're playing chess. At first, you're, oh, this is the best camera angle for me. You forget that you're on camera because you're so focused on the board, on the play. And, Anna, we have another fianchetto, but we have matching fianchettos on opposite side of the board. So whose king is going to be under attack? My opinion, looks like white has the safe for the two kings. But what do you think?
I think that I think I agree with you. I kind of feel like White's attack on the Black King could be quite quick. Like just just going something like I don't know f3 g4 h4. All of that is happening very quickly, and I can't really see exactly how Black is going to attack the White King yet because something like I mean b5 b4 would not really lead to anything. So I guess then b5 a5, but then the b5 pawn is going to be hanging. So it seems like it's going to take quite a long time for Black to attack the White King.
You just illustrate that very well. And the hero is the f3 pawn. Because there are more pawns for white where you're trying to attack, black doesn't have a pawn on c6 so that you can then play a5. So this pawn on f3 defends the center and also helps these pawns go forward. So black's quote-unquote attack not really picking up steam anytime soon. And I think this can be extremely dangerous. And Alina also is well ahead in the clock, nearly 2 minutes at this point, and her plan to push forward, as you said, more straightforward. And it's not going to be simple as let's go get a checkmate because I pushed my pawns up. Black can defend. It just feels easier to play at this point for Alina.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens in this game.
We will keep an eye out on it. Let's go to the board 3. Keep on going down the lineup. We have Hanna-Marie Kleck with the black pieces, so far winning her games for Grand Quebec. And you have Maxime Lavrov with the white piece, international master. And look at this position. This knight on d4, pawn on d5 say, let me take advantage of the c6 square. But black often can say, I'll put my bishop on d7, or I'll put my bishop on b7 to attack your pawn at some point. And this pawn on d5 can actually be overextended. So I think white wants to play f4 to get the knight into c6. But what he's quickly recognizing is that after f4, while that looks good, I'm attacking the knight, black can throw in a shot against the queen. Your queen has only one safe square to go to, queen to d2. And now my knight comes in with tempo, so you don't get knight c6 winning a piece. That's what you want, is if this knight goes to d7, you get knight c6. That ends the game in white's favor. But because you throw in bishop to g4, you can play knight c4, and then you get some time to regroup.
Yep. Very, very good point. That bishop g4 was a very nice move, but it was not played by Hannah. Instead, she played c5 in this position.
What a move. c5 would never even consider it. She can still
that's
play.
Just giving a pawn, but
it's filling the square. That's her idea. She's filling the square so the knight can't go here. And I guess her claim, Anna, is she'll get that pawn back later. And it's justified according to the engine. She is better according to the computer.
Very cool move that really, I mean, yeah, I did not think about that move at all. But yeah, wow, that's such a cool move. So I guess that now maybe she can go for the same idea as you said before with bishop g4, just to, develop her pieces immediately and get that rook to c8 or queen to c7 to attack that pawn. She's going for knight g4 instead.
But now the evaluation that's starting to go up and up for white. The extra pawn, I guess, is going to feel safe. If this knight can land on d5, black's position is in trouble. So I would look for that. I know that if this queen lands on h4 for black, all of a sudden there's some counterplay. So maybe like a d5, bishop c5, queen h4. That's the kind of quick moves you need for black in a position like this where you're down material.
Yep, but it might take a while. That's the issue. I'm not really sure where this knight is going now. If let's say, for instance, h3 is the knight, then the idea just to go back to f6.
Well, now you can't, but okay, queen b6. This makes sense. If you get a turn, you can pile up on this knight on d4. So h3, while it may try to win this knight on g4, your knight on d4 is also falling victim to an attack. So actually, it was much trickier because knight c3 was the move I said, and yet bishop f6 played, and the eval bar goes down. So I don't know what white possibly missed there. Knight c3 looked like such a normal move, but that's how tricky chess can be. Where, yeah, if you have the engine as your assistant, you can play all the best moves. Without it, it's a complicated game, of course, but we're trying to work through the complications and help you out. But queen b6 now the threat. There also could be an idea of bishop takes and queen h4 if you're not careful, hitting the h2 pawn and the rook on e1. So if you play some careless move like a3, and we get some situation like this, queen h4, let me drop the queen there, hits the rook and hits the pawn. So white is the one who suddenly needs to be careful.
Yeah, no, you have to be very careful in these type of situations. There are many tactics, and yeah, some ideas like queen b6 could also be perhaps played, but she's going for h3 now, or he's going for h3 now, Maxim.
I think you have to play queen b. You're not putting your knight back on h6. That looks bad. Queen b6 played. There's no easy way to defend this knight because you don't want to bring your knight back to e2 like this. You can probably get away with it, and actually it's what's played. But black, instead of going to h6, can go knight back to e5 thanks to tactics. You take my knight. Oh, it's a knight for a pawn. Well, I'll do the same thing right back to you. I will eventually win your pawn on c6, and you see the eval bar says zeros because, of course, it's always zeros in chess.
That's actually really cool. It feels like white has played very natural moves, but still, now the eval bar is not really thinking that white is as has the great position that they said that they had before. So it's really interesting how Hannah played this, I think.
Yes, very like active chess, right? Just throwing the pieces forward, playing c5, which, all right, the engine says not the best. She'll review the game after and figure out where she could have improved, but this was a very enterprising style. And now after 95, one more move, I take this pawn. And as we were discussing, you take, I take. Bishops love open space, and this king on g1 could find itself in trouble, especially if this pawn is taken and the bishop gets to b7. That's a very long diagonal to work with. So let's go to board 4. We have been here for a while. Ina Agrest with the white pieces. She drew that game with black in game 1, where she actually had the upper hand at the end of the game, but time trouble did not allow her to play for the win at that moment. She felt like she needed to just hold. But we talked about this in a different game. Anna, are we just going to see a g4 and a quick attack?
I think so. I think we're gonna see a g4. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that's just kind of how you want to continue the attack. To start pushing those pawns. I mean, I don't really know if you want to go, for instance, if you would like to keep your pawn in g2 to at some point go e5 and have that g2 pawn defending f3. I'm thinking e5 to open up the light square bishop.
True.
But yeah, in general, I think that's the sort of ideas we're going to be seeing. But instead, Ina went for bishop e3 in this position to kick the queen away.
I think she doesn't want to concern herself with a5, and now the queen and bishop line up on the b5 pawn, so a5 not possible. She's playing maybe a bit reserved at the moment. Her pieces are still better, but if you're not careful and you just say, oh, I'm solid, I don't need to do anything, black plays d5, starts opening up the board for her pieces, and then black could try to take advantage of it. So I think that bishop d2, okay, I see the point. Don't play rook d8. You lose the rook thanks to bishop a5. Knight a5 is another thing to consider. I like this. It may be quieter than I would have played had I had the white pieces going for g4, but she's not committing herself to anything. And if d5, now she can play e5. You mentioned this idea. This would be a dream come true for the bishop on d3.
Yep, absolutely. A bishop on d3 is not really doing a lot right now. Of course, it's defending c2, but it's almost like a big pawn. That's typically what you say when there's a pawn right in front of the bishop. It sort of becomes like a pawn itself. So to give that bishop some life, that would be a dream come true. But I kind of like the fact that she's trying to position her pieces in a good way, and she's not really making any big decisions with her pawns yet.
And e5 played to emphasize what Anna just said, that bishop on d3 is not going anywhere. And you can still play g4. This might be the moment to do so. Another idea is say rook c1 and c4, because your king is actually quite safe on b1, and you can improve your bishop and also open up the queen side. But you're looking at d5 as well. That's kind of a scary move to see. So g4, either taking on h5 or pushing through the g5, and there it is. plays it. She times it well. Her advantage is still there according to the engine, but I think both players recognizing it's not, you're not thinking in terms of numbers. You think, well, is this king going to be safe? Because if the answer is no, white will just win the game. And if black can find out a way to just keep safe for the time being, maybe she'll be able to counter on the queen side. But Anna, I'm looking at the game between Georg and Jan. That one's really deep into the end game where Jan just played the move rook lift, rook a4. And on one hand, this pawn a5 could be seen as a weakness. If in a king and pawn endgame, you can go win it. But for now, it could be seen as a strength because maybe rook b4, rook b6, and use that pawn to help plant the rook on b6.
Exactly, yeah. And if that pawn is not lost, then that pawn is also, that one single pawn on a5 could be stopping the movement of both the b7 pawn and the a6 pawn. So that one pawn is controlling those two pawns. So in general, as long as that pawn is not lost, it is a very strong pawn. And if you can reinforce that pawn with b4, for instance, I think that's definitely a good pawn. So
yeah, I was just going to say, look at the knights here. The knight on e6 is actually a good defender. The knight on e4 is an aggressor. And white's pawns are kind of perfectly placed. The c3 pawn takes away d4. The g3 pawn takes away f4. The h4 pawn takes away g5. The knight has nowhere to improve, at least not from this position. Whereas the knight on e4 maybe doesn't have anywhere to improve to, but it looks strong here in the center.
Definitely, and if that knight on e6 ever moves, there's going to be a knight c5 coming in, and that could perhaps be very strong as well. But now instead, Ian is going for rook b4 to put some pressure on b7, and just like you said, perhaps he wants to put his rook on b6, because there the rook would be very strong and would also be putting pressure onto b7.
I think Georg has to get passive now. You don't want to. It's an end game. You just can't afford to drop pawns or allow this knight to infiltrate more. You mentioned the c5 square. I would love to get there. But knight d8, maybe you just have to say, I don't like it, but I'll go knight d8, maybe king to c7 or c8, defend this pawn. And king c7, rook to b6, I'm already attacking your knight, so you have to move regardless. And the knight probably will end up on this d8 square. Sorry, doesn't look fun. I don't like it. It's defensive, and white is taking control over most of the action. But I think Georg has to do it, has to do it quickly. Look at the time. He's 2 minutes and 40 seconds to Jan's 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
The thing is that it's always easier to attack than to defend, I think. And that can also be seen in the time in the time that if you are defending, it's not as fun, and you're probably going to perhaps think a little bit more. If you're attacking, the moves just come very natural to you.
Well, speaking of attacking and defending, I need to switch games right now because I just saw the move played here between Hanamir Klek and Maxim Lavrov. The move was knight e6, and that knight gets up in there, hitting the rook. The pawn can't take on e6 because the rook on f8 is hanging, and you're also hitting the pawn f7 3 times. All of your firepower aimed towards that black king, and rook e4 played tricky move, but there's got to be a mate. Probably just rook takes f7. Trying to go rook f8. It's mate. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just checkmate. There it played. And no matter what you do, you can move the rook anywhere. If you take on f7, the queen replaces the rook and then goes to f8. You're getting checkmate on f8. You see mate in 2 moves. Unstoppable.
Unstoppable. Absolutely unstoppable.
And this happened so quickly. I mean, in this position, black was the one. We mentioned this idea. That looks really good. And then queen h6. All right. Oh, the rook's e7, rook c4. Rook f1, and just not sensing the danger of this knight coming here, and play bishop c6. Maybe bishop c8 is necessary, something like that, but knight e6, that's a winning position now for white and for Team Spare.
What a nice move, that knight d6. It's just one of those tactics that if you haven't seen it, it really just completely surprises you because you really were not expecting that in that position. And that was a very, very nice find by Maxim Lavrov.
Agreed. And let's go. Well, this game is about to end. If they conclude soon, we'll show the final position. The game between Elena Kashlinskaya and Alexander Kadetsky. You said attacking is easier than defending. How about this? There's a knight on f5. White is down a piece. It was a sacrifice to get here. Just a couple moves ago. Queen e7, knight takes h5, pawn takes knight f5. You told us about the Garry Kasparov quote, right? Knight's in f5. It's like almost a win, guaranteed. And that knight can't be kicked out. h5's under attack. h6, e7, d6. Where does this queen even go? f8, that feels like a sad move to play.
It's not where it wants to be, and now after queen takes h5, there's some extra pressure being put on that bishop. And I think that now it's time for the rook lift. The famous rook lift, rook f4, rook g4.
Oh, yes, because you can even take on e5, bring your rook to... This is just powering through, crushing. And looks like Elena Kashlinskaya, the free agent for Gronka Bank. This is a winning position. She knows it. I'm sure that Kadetsky knows it well. He's hoping that somehow he can weasel his way out of this. It just... The knight can't move. The knight moves, the bishop is hanging. There's a knight on f5.
Yep, the
Rook
knight
f4.
is pinned.
Yeah. No, Anna, this is brilliant.
Rook f4, there we have it.
You called for it. The players said, I simply must. And this is happening before you know it. This king has nowhere to go.
Yeah. Now this seems to just be completely crushing. Very, very, very nice game by Alina here.
Instructive play, and rook e8. You can even take on d6. I probably would not take that pawn. Doesn't feel necessary. Rook g4. We've been mentioning this idea. Oh, wait, you take the knight, but then I can take on g7, and your queen is trapped. So the best you can do is give up that queen for the bishop, and this knight on g4 is also under attack. Your king is going to remain unsafe. And you see the eval bar, completely winning for white. So I'm just going to, out of the corner of my eye, look at the other two games. It looks like the end game still going on between Georg and Jan. The game between Ina Agrest, still plenty of life in that. So let's see if Alina can land the knockout. That's what I want to see. Is she going to play rook to g4? Is she just going to take on d6 now that the rook moved out the way? What do you think she does?
Taking on d6 seems kind of good because obviously it's a pawn and you're activating another piece, you're activating your other rook. But I also feel like, yeah, she's going for rook g4. I just felt like that pawn on d6 was really stopping the queen from having any movement. So it's very pretty that after knight takes g4, there's bishop takes g7 and the queen is trapped.
Yes, and you make a good point about, the pawn is free, you bring a piece in, but you also give black a little bit of time, whereas rook g4 is forcing, you're threatening rook takes g7, your knight is helping out. This knight in f5, it's too strong, and knight g6 does not help you because bishop takes g7 still traps that queen. So white is going to win here. I think
Very nice.
Alina will even up the match because Spare won with Maxim Lavrov. And let's go to another game because we know the results that's going to happen here. Let's go to Ina Agrest game. We haven't checked in a while against Maria Komiagina, where it says zeros. Every time we tune into a position and it says zeros, we're like, wait, why is this completely equal? It's not. There's plenty of life left. Even on the clock, though, both players at a minute 50 about. Would you take white or black, ignoring the evaluation bar for a second?
That is a very good question. I kind of like that black has the idea of going a5, a4, and that they can push that a pawn. I feel like white's attack on the king side has sort of stagnated here, and it has sort of stopped. So, in that regard, I like it. I'm not really sure where this bishop is gonna go now. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
No, that's important. I would play rook d5 because you give yourself the c5 square, and you want to play rook d5 regardless. You think, I can't do it, I'll lose my bishop, but the rook d5 move would have saved it. Although now that might be a pawn worth capturing. That's
Yep.
There's a pro.
e4. That e4 pawn seems to be a very important pawn in this game. Also because that e5 pawn, could become a very, very, very strong passed pawn in the endgame.
Although free pawns can be deceiving. You take the pawn and then you allow these rooks to come in and then attack your pawn. The e5 pawn is more important to the defense of black's king. And we did see a victory by Elena Kashlinskaya. No surprise there. She had won her opponent's queen. And in this game, rook e2 played. I feel like white has a clear plan now. So even though you're down material, at least your next few moves, your next idea is more obvious. And queen g4 played. Don't take on e5. You drop a rook here. Can you just play rook e1 and try to pile up?
Yep. And I mean that e5 pawn, okay, you're going rook d2 instead, so you're not really going for the e5 pawn. Instead of trying to double up on the d file. Bishop f8.
That's a good move. That's a really good move, trying to play bishop g7. You can't play e4 if the bishop comes to d4 and the queen comes to f6. You get checkmated, but if your bishop comes to g7, that helps your king preemptively.
Yep. No, I really like that move as well. Queen e6 now. The queen is leaving g4. Do you think that, you shouldn't really go e4 just yet, right? e4 is too early here.
I wouldn't rush that move. And we're going to just go between both games. There's only 2 games left. It decides who is the FIDE World Corporate Champion. Actually, the other game just finished in a draw. I was about to bring us there. I'll show the
Wow.
board really quickly. That game finished as a draw. So Georg Meyer putting up amazing defense. His position did look worse, but his rook got very active and just went around, and they repeated moves here. They agreed to a draw, but you see the engine evaluation 0. Black can't move this knight or this king,
Mm.
the b7 pawn, and all of white's pawns are defended for now. So a draw was agreed. Let's go back to the only game remaining, and it is an even match. So let's switch here. This game, all the marbles. Black has 25 seconds of counting down, but an extra pawn. I would rather have the time. Oh no! Rook d8 check.
Wow,
Queen f8.
this just changed everything.
Oh,
Will
it's
she
amazing.
find it?
She finds it. She finds it. And Ina Agres is about to win Grenke, the World Corporate Championship. This king is hunted down. I've had the feeling that taking on e4 would give white easier play. And look at that. Queen f8 threatens mate, threatens mate, threatens mate on g8 as well. You cannot stop all 3 checkmates. You don't even have a single check for the black pieces. That's mate by force.
Wow. Once again, what a way to finish a game. We were saying that, this was going to be a long game where black would have to try to convert this into a win, being a pawn up, but this just ended immediately after this one move, which was not, super easy to see immediately, but there's just this checkmate.
And
What
look
a
at the
way-
players. Look at them. They're so happy. They're
Yeah,
smiling.
smiling.
They're all really good friends. And Elena there smiling, joining them as the free agent. That's a wonderful achievement because they had their backs against the wall. It was 2-2 after the first match. In this match, Georg was being pressured by Jan Napomischi. You see them talking. They're, of course, on a Zoom call. These were fair play measures to make sure that the arbiters could see all the players, see their screens and everything to uphold fair play. But look at them. It's what I love to see. It's just pure joy. They just played an epic final match. And look at them. All across those 4 faces, just smiles all around.
It's just absolutely amazing to see that. And I think especially the feeling when you're playing in a team, it's just even more amazing to win because it's not just you, but you can share the happiness about winning with other people and people that you're working with here. It's just absolutely amazing to see them also happy.
Wow. I mean, seriously, Grenke in general, they are a company that supports chess. Now they're a company that wins world championship titles. Great to see that and remind everybody that they're the champion. They have won the World Corporate Chess Championship. And we know that the first 4 teams, they secure seats to participate in online simul against the winner of the candidates. I don't think the winner of the candidates will be very happy to face these 4 players. Just going to put, is Jan Napomischi, if he wins the candidates, does he play himself in the simul?
That's the question.
Right? What kind of agreement is this? I feel bad for the win of the candidates. Maybe the players don't want to win the candidates anymore. You want to play Magnus for the world championship, but how can you play these people in a simul? That's impossible. That is just cruel, frankly. And so they get the title, and you see that the team that raised the most money for charity throughout the competition is invited to the world championship. So it's really great to see this tournament come to a conclusion. It was a big fight. We saw the smiles. They were ecstatic as Granka Bank beats Spare. They won 1.5 in terms of the individual matches, but it was about the board points. They win 4.5, 3.5. That final game, Ina Agres turned it around. She delivers a victory when her team needed it. Anna, that was just awesome.
That was awesome. These games were so incredibly exciting. And just like you mentioned before, it's not just about, board number 1, but it's about all the other boards. And here we can see that Ina Agrest really brought the win to the team here at the end, which was just absolutely amazing. These games, I mean, they could not have been more exciting. We've seen so many tactics. We've seen so many beautiful games. And all of them have ended very quickly after some nice tactical variation. So it's been an absolute honor to be able to commentate this with you, Robert. Just like always. And yeah, I really hope that this is not the last FIDE Online World Corporate Chess Championship that they do.
I don't think it will be. It was a tremendous success. And Granka Bank, we saw them smiling. They clearly have good team chemistry. And for that team, seriously, great stuff. The Granky, you'll recognize that name, not just as world champions in the FIDE Online World Corporate Chess Championship, but also as sponsors of the Grenke Classic, which features the likes of Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana and some of the top German players. They are represented in the Bundesliga as well. So, I mean, this is just great stuff. And, people have been asking throughout the tournament, Anna, oh, is this just bringing grandmasters on teams? That doesn't seem right. No, the grandmaster works at Grenke. Georg Meyer, the top board for this team, he works at Grenke. So did two of the other very strong players. It was just Elena Kashlinska that brought on. That worked to their advantage. She's the free agent. She's under that 2,500 threshold. You could have only one player above. She won the final game. We saw that attack with the knight in f5. So Anna, clearly good team chemistry, good choices on whom to bring onto the squad. Can't congratulate them enough.
No, absolutely. Big congrats to Grenke Bank for this. Absolutely amazing. And just to see that chemistry at the end, to see everybody smiling and being so happy, it was a beautiful moment. So can't congratulate them enough either.
I'm happy for them. I just was not rooting for either team, but you saw their just joy, and that's always good to see. It feels bad for Spare. They had a great showing. Napomischi led the way, and I guess that half point that he at the end where he let Georg Meyer off the hook. Not that he was ever winning, but he was just applying the pressure. Couldn't quite make the breakthrough. Georg is a very good defender, and there is pressure on players when you're that highly rated to win every single game. I think Jan can hold his head high. The whole team can, because they just met their match in Grenke. So through and through, that Spare team, they beat a very strong Spare Bank trade union in the semifinals, led by Anton Korbov. I think that there could only be one champion, but both teams looked equally deserving. Grenke gets on top. Anna, it's been a lot of fun covering the final with you. That was exciting. We saw some scrambles. We saw a checkmate in the first set of quarterfinal matches. We had a blitz tiebreak. It came down to the very last game. It can't get better than that.
It can't get better than that. I completely agree with you. It was so close all the time. There weren't really any, big 4-0s or stuff like that. Everything was super close all the time. And yeah, I mean, super exciting match, and the fact that it was all down to the very last match just made it even better. We've been so me and Robert, we've been so excited every single match, and we've been having to recover during the breaks just because the match has been so exciting. So we couldn't have asked for anything else.
That's right. And before we leave, I would be remiss not to thank FIDE for organizing this event, for Chess.com for being a partner and putting on the event, hosting all the games, all the arbiters who worked tirelessly to make sure that fair play standards were upheld, to make sure the event ran as smoothly as possible, the rounds beginning on time, to everyone behind the scenes putting in these late hours. The nighttime matchups ended past midnight for plenty of people, or started early in the morning if you're in Europe. So we know that our producer up early, working hard behind the scenes. Everyone who's watching, we appreciate you. The viewership for chess is a sight to behold. It's great to see the numbers increase as more people get involved. And finally, to the players, this event was not possible without them. Grenke Bank, the champions, but so many teams deserve our praise and applause. And Anna, again, I really appreciate you joining me, and everybody who was able to donate. Thank you so much for your generosity, for helping these initiatives, for FIDE, for players with disabilities, for veteran players, and for Education Chess. On that note, it's time to sign off. Anna, again, appreciate you. We'll be commenting again soon, I'm sure. And it was an absolute blast.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you once again for everybody who organized this event, and everybody behind the scenes, and everybody watching, all of the players. It's been an honor to be able to be here the very last day and to commentate with you the finals. And yeah, I'm sure they'll be commentating more stuff in the future, Robert.
Maybe even another corporate championship. But for now, this one's in the books. It is the first one. Grenke Bank, the champions. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Keep having fun with chess.